5:30, and we do have quorum present, so I will call the meeting of the Madison Plan Commission of June 13th, 2022 to order. First, we will have some information from our technical facilitator.
All right, welcome to our virtual Plan Commission meeting. We're going to cover a few basic items before beginning. If you lose connection at any point during the meeting, you can reconnect by clicking the link or calling the number in your original email. To members and city staff members, if you are able, please activate your video and keep it on for the duration of the meeting. Staff, if you are able, please activate your video when you are speaking. Use the raise hand feature when you'd like to be recognized to speak or ask questions. Staff, click raise hand when you are asked a question. The chair will do their best to call on committee members in the order in which their hands are raised. Lowering your hand will take you out of the queue. Members of the public who have registered to speak, the name you entered in Zoom must match the name you entered in registration. You will remain muted until called upon. The clerk will tell you when your time is up. After speaking, a member of the body may ask you a question. If you need to share documentation with the commission, please send it to the email listed in today's agenda. Chair, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Jesse. The first item on our agenda is public comment. I do not believe there is any public comment. Is that correct, Kevin?
That's correct.
Okay, very good. Communications, disclosures, and recusals. Members of the body should make any required disclosures or recusals under the city's ethics code. Are there any disclosures or recusals? Commissioner Solheim.
Related to item 4, the organization that I work for, Scenair, is partnering with Lincoln Avenue, the developer, on an affordable development elsewhere in Wisconsin. It will not impact my decision.
Okay, thank you, Commissioner. Mm-hmm. Anything else? Seeing nothing else, we'll go on to the minutes of the May 23rd regular meeting. Are there any additions or corrections to the minutes? Seeing no raised hands, is there a motion to approve? Moved by Commissioner Cantrell. Is there a second? Seconded by Commissioner Solheim. I will assume unanimous consent unless I see a raised hand to object. Seeing no raised hands, the motion passes unanimously. Okay, upcoming meetings. Our next regularly scheduled meetings are Monday, June 27th, as well as July 11th and 25th. And those would be at our regular time of 5:30. Then we also have a special working session meeting on Thursday, June 23rd at 5 o'clock. Okay, moving on. We do have some routine business, at least it's categorized as such. But first, we will do the consent agenda. So it is the custom of the Plan Commission to remove from the agenda those items on which the staff believes an application has had sufficient review to warrant approval with all of the conditions placed upon it by various city departments on which the applicant accepts those conditions, and there are no individuals who have registered to speak in opposition to the item. These items are placed onto a consent agenda and they are addressed at the beginning of our meeting. People interested in those items can go home, disconnect, unless a member of the Plan Commission requests separation, in which case the item is removed from the consent agenda and taken in the regular course of business. So of the items before us today, the following agenda items are proposed for the consent agenda. Agenda item 2, agenda items 15, 16, and then agenda item 17 is to be referred to a future meeting unspecified. Are there any requests for separation? Seeing no raised hands, I will read those items into the record. So agenda item 2, Legistar 711618, authorizing the mayor and city clerk to execute a lease for farming purposes with Guy and Laura Drager for approximately 13 acres of land located at 10202 Midtown Road, First Alder District. Agenda item 15, Legistar 71241, located at 705 Woodward Drive, 18th Alder District, consideration of a conditional use to construct an accessory building on a lakefront parcel. Agenda item 16, Legistar 71243, located at 6067 Gemini Drive and 5909 Sharpsburg Drive, 3rd Alder District, consideration of an alteration to an approved planned development district specific implementation plan to amend the zoning text for a 2-building mixed-use development to add conditional uses in the commercial corridor transitional zoning district as allowable uses in the development. Consideration of a conditional use for a restaurant nightclub and consideration of a conditional use for an outdoor eating area for a restaurant nightclub to allow an existing coffee shop to have an entertainment license and outdoor eating area. And then for referral, agenda item 17, Legistar 71549. Do I have a motion? Commissioner Cantrell.
I move approval of the consent agenda
Is there
and the referral.
Thank you. Is there a second? Seconded by Commissioner Solheim. Do you have any comments as to your motion, Commissioner
No.
Cantrell? Okay, thank you. Then we will come to a vote, and I will assume unanimous consent unless I see a raised hand to object. Seeing no raised hands, the consent agenda passes unanimously. Then moving to our item of routine business, our item of new business, agenda item 3, Legistar 71581, accepting gender inclusive language in adopted city plans. And Kevin Furkow from our staff has some comments.
Thank you, Chair. I'll just do a very quick overview here, and please let me know if there's any questions afterwards. In regards to item 3, with guidance from an interagency staff team, the mayor issued a new APM, or Administrative Procedure Memorandum, and that was numbered 2-52, titled Inclusive Workplace, Transgender, Gender Nonconforming, and Non-Binary Employees, and an associated gender inclusive language style guide for the City of Madison employees. Following the publication of this APM in 2021, planning staff began to review adopted plans and accepted reports and identified several small language changes in a total of 26 documents. That list is included as an attachment to this file. Those plans and these types of changes have been summarized in the list, and staff was advised by the city attorney's office to handle these in a batch of these documents. Staff wanted to just note and appreciation for those colleagues who spent the time and put those together. And that's all I have for the short overview. Please let me know if there's any questions.
Are there any questions for Kevin? Seeing no raised hands, I would be looking for a motion. Commissioner Cantrell.
Motion to approve.
Is there a second? Seconded by Commissioner Mendez. Anyone want to speak to this motion? Seeing no raised hands, we will come to a vote, and I will assume unanimous consent unless I see a raised hand to object. Seeing no raised hands, the motion passes unanimously. And before we move on to agenda item 4, I'm going to ask for Kevin to just confirm the number of votes we would need to pass a motion, given the number of folks that we have in attendance. I do know that we have at least one person with power out who is not here. So Kevin, could you confirm, please, the number of votes we would need?
Yes, I'm confirming. I believe we have 8 members of the commission with us at this time. And if that's correct, we would need 5 votes to pass an item.
Yes. Okay, very good. Thank you. And at this time, I would like to welcome Alder Curry and Alder Paulson as the newest members then of the Plan Commission. So,
hold up.
You haven't been confirmed?
I have. The mayor has not had any announcements, and I am not a member of the Plan Commission. I'm here.
Okay, then
I was here in support of an item on the consent agenda, but I am not a member.
Very good. Okay, thank you, Alder Paulson, for letting us know that. So then we have 7 members here, Kevin, rather than 8. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7.
And I believe with 7 members, then we would need 4 votes to pass an item.
Okay, very good. Thank you. And thank you, Alder Paulson. Moving on then to agenda item 4, Legistar 69519, substitute, amending the City of Madison official map to establish mapped reservations for future streets and highways in the City of Madison, consistent with recommendations in the adopted Oscar Meyer Special Area Plan. And we do have a staff presentation for this. Bill Fruehling will be giving us some information about this one. Bill?
Thank you, Chair. Again, Bill Fruehling. I'm a principal planner in the city's planning division. And let me share my screen here. All right, I assume everybody can see that, right?
Yes.
Thank you. So as described in the joint staff memo dated June 3rd, following adoption of the Oscar Meyer Special Area Plan in July of 2020, staff prepared official map amendment that will be referred to as the original alignment, and associated proactive rezonings consistent with the plan as directed by the Common Council when the plan was adopted. And during the adoption process of the official map amendment, as well as the proactive rezonings, Alder Abbas proposed a substitute street alignment that arose from some meetings that he facilitated between a potential developer, Lincoln Avenue Financial, and some local advocacy groups. And the goal of that was to try to increase the amount of open space that's on the site. So then staff from multiple agencies worked with Alder Abbas to develop a substitute. And that's really what you have before you tonight. So staff has prepared just a brief presentation to kind of walk through and address some of the commonly raised issues, regarding this topic. So, and we can talk about this again at the end, but agenda item 4 is an official substitute alignment for the official mapping, and item 5 would be rezonings associated with that. So I will get to that at the end, but that's how those 2 items are related. But first, I wanted to share a bit about the. So let me minimize that a bit. Sorry. Just walk you through a bit to how we got to where we are. So this is a pretty big area, planning area, that we are just zoomed in on kind of the core around the topics that we're talking about tonight. So staff really tries to keep in mind the broader context and future for this area. So just to provide a little orientation here, this street on the top, Zaberg Avenue, comes down to Packers on the right side of the map, comes across to Commercial Avenue, then up again to Sherman Avenue. So this footprint of this big white building is the former Oscar Meyer site. So the concept in 2009 preserved this wetland and areas around it. And that was going to be the proposed open space at that time of this initial concept. One of the key objectives was, as this area develops and changes and welcomes, hundreds or thousands of new residents, many new employees and businesses, and just a lot of activity in this entire area, thought that it was important to have a new connection between Sherman Avenue to the east all the way through to Packers Avenue. So you can see, going back to this early concept, there was that connection. But as we continued to work through a public process, there was a lot of desire to increase the size of the open space. So a few months later, this image on the right, you can see how staff worked to provide a larger open space for the area. We also moved this important east-west connection to the north to accommodate that. And that also got rid of another issue that we were having. We didn't really want to have a street crossing so close to the railroad tracks on Sherman Avenue. So that east-west connection got bumped up. So when the draft plan was adopted, it had about 14 acres of open space. So it even bumped it up a little bit more from that last concept that you saw. On the council floor, when this plan was being considered for adoption in July of 2020, there were a number of amendments aimed at further increasing the size of this open space. And so on the council floor, the council recommended to add about 2 acres in this area to the open space for a total of 16 acres. So you can see in the map on the left how the plan that was introduced, that was going to be residential adjacent to the park. So basically what the council adopted to get to the 16 acres was to remove this tier of lower density residential and the street that was in there that would front on. So the map on the right is what was adopted. And I need to acknowledge that this result to get to 16 acres was really the result of a lot of persistent resident input. So we heard that, and we worked hard to try to make this whole area, to have it set up for the best future, for the benefit of the city and the region. And so really feel like we did push the amount of open space for this. And, really, I think the testimony that you will probably hear tonight from the public, a lot of the input, it's I think the city staff and the residents are really our ultimate objectives are all in very close alignment. It's just a matter of how we get there that we're continuing to talk about. So wrong arrow, sorry. So again, the map on the right is the adopted plan, and you can see this Ross Street extension from Sherman Avenue coming down here, crossing the railroad tracks and extending out to Packers. So that's basically in alignment with Coolidge Street that is east of Packers. The plan does not recommend that there's a connection there except for bicycles and pedestrians. So that's not a full intersection, but that is the street alignment that's in the adopted plan. Also, and I wanted to point out that Ruskin Street coming north from Commercial Avenue and basically forming the eastern border of the park continues up and ultimately connects with Huxley that goes on up to Aberg and beyond. So those two streets were really key in making sure this area is well connected north-south and east-west in the future. So after the council adopted the plan, city staff prepared an official map amendment. Now, really what an official map amendment does is identifies those highest priority streets. So you could see, like on this adopted plan, there are a number of proposed new streets in this area, but really with the official mapping, we are focusing on those streets that we think are really critical as far as their location moving forward. And so this is a bit more of an engineered, if you will, layout compared to what was in the plan that you just saw. But again, you can see Ruskin. There's a bit of Ruskin that exists right now coming up from Commercial, bending over and connecting up with Huxley over here. And then this is Ross Street coming down and aligning with Coolidge over here. Once we do that, the existing bit of Ross Street that exists now from this point to the existing railroad crossing could be vacated once this is constructed. So as is laid out in the staff memo, proposing these street alignments was really kind of threading the needle, because in the plan we were trying to balance so many different, sometimes competing objectives, but felt that this alignment did a really good job of missing or working with some natural features. So again, following the memo, up in this area where you see these green circles, that's a very high quality stand of some oak and hickory trees. So we adjusted some alignment to make sure that we stayed away from those. Late in the process, there was an issue that was raised. If you can kind of see outlined here in a light green, there's a tree line here that interest was expressed to try to preserve those trees as well. And so that influenced some of the street alignment. These are not very high quality trees. And again, if you read the memo, if and when this area becomes under city ownership for an open space, Parks Division estimated that likely 80% or more of the trees would need to be removed because they are low quality. Many of them are dead or dying, as you can see in the photo here. A lot of them are kind of leaning. And so Parks staff sent an arborist out and some other park staff to walk that site to do an evaluation of the trees. And it was their estimation that, for safety reasons, probably 80% or more of those trees would be removed once the city owns that. I also, on this map, wanted to point out the wetlands. So this kind of bluish, I guess it's blue, line is the wetland boundary. And you can see, so this is a large surface parking lot right now that the two proposed streets intersect in the middle of. And so there is a finger of the wetland boundary that comes along the south side of that parking lot, which was really, I think, a constructed drainage ditch. So as stormwater ran off of this parking lot, it would be conveyed this way. And so, really the gem of the area is over here. Of course, we are concerned also with preserving the associated uplands, but But I wanted to point out that the street alignment, we really tried to minimize the impact on any wetlands. And so the alignment is kind of in this area. There's also been concern raised about a potential archaeological site. So this is a close-up of Ross Street coming down here, and those trees are the higher quality oaks and hickories that we talked about. So we've been in contact with the Wisconsin Historical Society, and they are not aware of any archaeological sites here. There is a slight rise in the ground in this area. And so when we asked them about that, they were not aware of any documented archaeological sites in that area. And even so, the right-of-way, the edge of the right-of-way, which the street is even inset from that, is about 100 feet away from the edge of this rise in topography, I guess I'll call it, in this area. And so, this is a type of thing that is not uncommon in this area when the city's doing construction projects. So Chris Pedikowski from City Engineering is here. And if there are any questions about how the city deals with that in street reconstruction projects, Chris can answer that. So this is with the original street alignment. This is kind of how the park would lay out. So about almost 14 acres of it could be zoned to conservancy right now. The remaining 2 acres are the kind of northern 2 acres of a parcel at 702 Ruskin Street, as is shown here. And so I will talk more about that in a minute, but I wanted to show this slide to note that, the development of this park, as is pretty typical, likely will occur in phases. And it's somewhat unusual that we would be in a position to proactively zone a large majority of that parkland kind of very soon after a plan is adopted. And so the plan still is unchanged and proposes a 16-acre parkland as is being shown here. But this southern 2 acres, again, that was added at the time of the council meeting, would probably just need to come later because there's an active business on that site right now. So the map on the left, again, is the original alignment. The map on the right is the proposed rezoning. So the Planning Commission saw this on March 7th. So the Planning Commission recommended adoption of the alignment on the left and the rezoning as shown on the map on the right. So it's important to note that particularly this boundary, if you can follow my cursor, and then this boundary follow the center lines of these streets. And so this map, the zoning map went along with this street alignment. So these two maps, the map on the left is the proposed substitute alignment. So that's item 4 on your agenda. Item 5 on your agenda would be the map on the right, and that is an adjusted zoning. So if the Plan Commission were to recommend adoption of the substitute alignment, then this is how the proactive zoning would change on that. So I'll just toggle back and forth here so you can see the differences a bit. So just really in conclusion here, and as laid out in the staff memo, staff is recommending the original alignment, and it would move the Ross Street crossing to the south to this area to align with Coolidge Street across Packers Avenue. And so really this crossing, so railroad crossings, moving railroad crossings are kind of a big ask. And so we have talked to a consultant that we have worked with on railroad crossing issues in the past, and Chris Pedikowski can talk more about that. But it was his strong recommendation that this alignment would give us the highest probability of that railroad crossing being approved. It's relocating an existing Ross Street crossing just further to the south. It allows for that continuous east-west movement. The four-way stop that this creates, as opposed to two T intersections, is more direct. It's safer for bikes and pedestrians, and it has greater long-term flexibility for any transit that may go through here to serve this area, including bicyclists. So while staff believe that the substitute alignment is technically feasible, we really, staff from planning, traffic engineering, and parks, believe that the original alignment is preferable. And we think that it, primarily because it improves we believe this likelihood of getting the relocated rail crossing approved. It's safer for bicycles and pedestrians. It's a more direct connection. The original alignment protects key natural resources, potential archaeological sites, and would avoid a large portion of even the lower quality stand of trees. So the last Monday evening, the Transportation Policy and Planning Board recommended the original alignment. And so that is what is before you this evening. I should note that Dan McAuliffe from Planning Division, who was a project manager on the Oscar Meyer Special Area Plan, Chris Pedikowski from Engineering is here, and he can talk about streets and the railroad crossing and how they deal with potential archaeological sites. Sean Malloy is here from Traffic Engineering, who can talk about street alignments and the different modes of transportation. And finally, Eric Knepp is here from Parks, who can talk about park issues. And I can also answer questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Bill. With that, we will move on to public testimony, and then we'll loop back and get questions from Bill. The first registrant is Paul. So I'll open the public hearing. The first registrant is Paul Nolander, Kensington, Maple Bluff. He's opposed and wishing to speak, and he's representing Friends of Hartmeyer Natural Area. Paul, you have 3 minutes.
Yes, can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. I'm Paul Milner, Ambassador of FUN, Friends of Urban Nature, a 10-year successful partnership of Parks Environmental Friends Group, co-sponsoring 120 outings a year round, connecting neighborhoods and kids with nearby parks and natural areas like this one. I am speaking here as chair of Friends of Hartmeyer Natural Area. Some city staff and alders apparently didn't get the memo about creating more housing or the Common Council vote to try and save at least 16 acres for a nature park, and are ignoring Madison's goals for green transportation, climate mitigation, and equitable access to nearby nature for a rapidly growing neighborhood population area school kids. That X-shaped road route is a target right on the heart of this area, routing more traffic and future buses and transit right through the middle of a quiet natural area and residents. The Oscar Meyer developer buying the 30-acre wetland has proposed a compromise that the community supports. North and East Side neighborhoods, environmental groups, the Friends of Meyer, and the local Madison Elder all support a compromised version 2 street plan that creates more badly needed senior and low-income housing than the city plan. The version 3 CN zoning says a larger, safer, more accessible nature park, including the mature tree line, as a quiet sanctuary for wildlife and people to enjoy year-round. The city proposed version 1 street plan and version 1 CN zoning would chop up and reduce developable space, resulting in fewer total senior and low-income housing units. It would cut back the nature park size substantially because the 2 acres aren't even open space. Put faster streets right next to the park and the Carpsey environmental wetland boundary with no recommended minimum setback, and destroy the bordering grove of trees. The version 2 street mapping creates more senior and low-income housing than the city plan. The version 3 CN conservation park says a larger, safer, quieter nature park than the city plan. This hard-fought compromise still includes the version 1 Coolidge connection the city wants, if the railroad permits it, but avoids creating an unsafe fast traffic shortcut right next to the quiet park and between senior and low-income housing. There are already major east-west arteries a block away at Aberg and Commercial. The version 3 compromise saves more space for putting in a separate walk and bike path, safer with citywide connections, provide safer park access for families and kids, and encourage green transportation. Some alders and city staff continue to devalue the ecological, human, climate, and water runoff benefits of this historic urban wetland and old tree line by calling them low quality. The nesting cranes, denning fox, turtles, deer, hawks, wood ducks, singing frogs, rare orchids, large stands of butterfly, milkweed, and old trees all tell us this is still a surprisingly high-quality restorable wetland natural area in spite of 100 years of human neglect and pollution. It offers important, equitable, healthy access to enjoy nearby nature for people of all means, a growing neighborhood population, and kids. The 16 acres we need to save is not just an arbitrary number. It is almost exactly the boundary of the Carpsey environmental corridor the city should be helping preserve. Let's save the best nature park we can while helping the developer create more, not less, needed housing. Please support this hard-fought compromise win-win-win for the environment, community, developer, and city. Step up and make the motion and vote for Agenda Item 4, Version 2, Street Mapping, and Agenda Item 3,
Thank you, Paul. That concludes your available time. The next registrant is Barbara Nolander, also Kensington Drive, opposed and wishing to speak. Barbara, you have 3 minutes.
Yeah, thank you. I'm asking you to please support the street map version 2 for agenda item 4, and please support version 3 for agenda item 5 to make the conservation nature park boundaries for the Meyer natural area. The city of Madison really has a diamond in the rough here. Putting a big X of streets through the park and neighborhood is a bad idea. Please preserve the beautiful natural area for generations to come and enjoy. Give the people of Madison a true 16-acre natural area that was promised to us by the Common Council. Thank you.
Thank you, Barbara. The next registrant is Melissa Huggins, East Johnson Street, in support, wishing to speak. Representing Lincoln Avenue Capital. Melissa, you have 3 minutes.
Great, thank you. Good evening, everyone. My name is Melissa Huggins, and I am a principal at Urban Assets, which is a planning and development firm here in Madison. I am working with Lincoln Avenue Capital and JLA on the neighborhood and city approval process. Liddell, can I just stop for a minute? We had a presentation that we wanted up. If we could get that, thanks. Thank you, Tim. All right, so I'm still on that slide. As a planner, I know there is an inherent tension between long-term plans and their implementation. Plans lay out the vision for the next 20 years or more, and recommendations are in the details, and the devil is in the details. As recommendations are implemented largely through private sector development projects, the vision usually holds, which is great because we have good plans. But sometimes the details may require changes. Due to physical constraints, financing, changing needs and priorities, and new information or new ideas. An example is the Wing Rebuild Plan, which was adopted in 2006. Redevelopment took years. And last year, we had a number of major developments, the last couple of years, including SSM's new fish hatchery clinic and the Truman Olson redevelopment. The plan also included alternatives for a new Cedar Street, and city and development teams had to rework Cedar Street to provide a developable site to accommodate grades that had not been fully studied during the Wingra Build Plan process. So, like the Wingra Build Plan, implementing the vision for the Oscar Meyer Special Area Plan is crucial, but the devil is in the details. So, how can the city improve the street network, including the rail crossing, and maximize affordable housing? Next slide, please. As we well know, we have an affordable housing crisis nationwide and here in Madison and Dane County. Studying and addressing the affordable housing crisis has been a priority for Madison for more than a decade. Stats from the City of Madison Affordable Housing Strategy in 2014 indicated that 3,000 to 4,000 people were being served by the shelter system. And I would imagine during current conditions that may have increased. And 50% of renters are cost burdened, and 30% of renters are severely cost burdened. This has been validated by the most recent report available, the 2020 Housing Affordability Report that the city must provide. And in that report, 27.4% of homeowners are cost burdened, and 54.6% of renters are cost burdened. Today, increasing the supply of affordable housing and addressing homelessness remains a top priority for Madison, as exemplified by the mayor's 2022 executive capital budget and capital improvement plan. Thank you. I'll turn it over to Kevin.
The next registrant is Kevin McDonald, Wilshire Boulevard, Santa Monica, California, in support, wishing to speak, representing Lincoln Avenue Capital. Kevin, you have 3 minutes.
Hi, and thanks for having me this evening. My name is Kevin McDonald. I'm a regional development partner with Lincoln Avenue Capital. Lincoln Avenue Capital is a mission-driven, next slide, please, mission-driven affordable housing company with over 20,000 units across the country. While our development team has experience working across the country, I'm based right here in the Madison area, and my development partner, Kyle Brasser, was born and raised in Madison. With close ties to the Madison area, we are very excited for the opportunity to help spearhead the redevelopment efforts that have been discussed since Oscar Meyer's closing announcement almost 7 years ago. Since the fall of 2021, we've been engaged with our design team and city staff to understand the Oscar Meyer area planned street locations. And while we've been engaged in the street discussions for some time, it's important to note that we are not involved in the development of the original street pattern and did express some concerns over the initial street plan at our first concept meeting with city staff, but we're told to push forward with the original design. Based on pushback at the March Common Council meeting, we worked closely with Alder-Boss, the neighborhood, and city staff to collaborate on a better street pattern, and were advised by city staff to develop plans based on both potential street patterns, as JLA will present later today. Driven by the expiring qualified census tract, we submitted 2 applications to WIDA at the end of 2021, and with significant local and statewide support, our applications were successfully approved and the qualified census tract was saved. The approval ensures that our site is the only development in the tract that can use the qualified census tract treatment. Given the extended qualified census tract, it means that if our development is not able to move forward in a timely fashion, that affordable workforce and senior housing as proposed will likely not be possible for the surrounding Oscar Meyer area census tract. Our WIDA applications that were approved at the end of 2021 identified 2 developments, one with 300 apartments and a second with 250 apartments. We have very limited flexibility for change from our original applications in order to preserve the qualified census tract treatment, which is what makes the affordable component of our development possible and gives us reduced flexibility in how our development is able to move forward, making the original street pattern very challenging and risk losing the state's qualified census tract designation. As an example of the level of excitement behind this development, earlier this year, the state selected our development proposal for an energy innovation grant. The energy innovation grant will allow our development team to maximize our sustainability efforts with the goal of our development to be used as a statewide case study for how affordable housing development can maximize energy efficiency and renewable energy while reducing utility costs for our workforce in a way that can be reproduced across the state. With high quality design, unmatched amenities, and meaningful sustainability goals, we believe our development efforts have the potential to be a model for how affordable housing can be developed throughout the state. And
Thank
hope
you, Kevin.
the Plan Commission.
That concludes your available time. The next registrant is Mark Ott, West Broadway, Monona, Wisconsin, in support wishing to speak, also representing Lincoln Avenue Capital. Mark, you have 3 minutes.
Great. Good evening. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Good. This is Mark Ott, JLA Architects. Thanks for your opportunity to speak to you tonight. So what's in, can you put up maybe I'm not seeing it. Is the presentation still up, Tim?
Yes, it's up now.
Can you go to the next slide, please? Thank you. What's in front of you tonight and what's on the screen are the two different street layouts that are in front of you. Obviously, the city's original street layout, as noted, and the substitute layout that was worked on by Alder Boss, the Friends of Meyer, the development team, with assistance from city staff. The core difference in these two plans is how the street intersections work and thus how much land each option requires. Here are some key facts, as you can see on this slide, about the options. The original street layout uses 3/4 of an acre more hardscape and impervious surface area to achieve it. It leaves 1.25 acre less park and wetland area. It requires the purchase and demolition of an existing private building via eminent domain just north of the Hartmeyer Ice Arena. Both plans, it also takes down more of that old growth stand of trees. Both plans do the same ultimately, which is connect the Huxley Street, Ross Streets, and Packer Avenue. Tonight, you're going to hear a lot about the hopeful future railroad crossing to Packers Ave. I want to point out that both options locate the crossing in the exact same location, and that, as staff mentioned, getting a railroad crossing is a big ask. Next slide, please. Additionally, the original street layout leaves less developable land. That reduction in developable land is a net result of about 75 plus desperately needed affordable housing units. As you can see on this slide, the loss of those units occurs in specifically the senior apartment building site. Next slide, please. We have looked at, as trying to then still maximize our total amount of affordable housing, we've looked at other options. We've looked at shifting the lost units from the senior to the family building. Unfortunately, this is limited due to the WIDA financial agreement that with Lincoln Financial. At a maximum, we could maybe shift 15 to 20 units between over to the family. We've also been asked the question about what about building the buildings taller to maximize the lost land. Unfortunately, this is not feasible as the building construction type methods change when you go above 6 stories, which is what our buildings are presented as. It's over 6 stories, the construction method changes and becomes much more expensive per square foot, which makes it infeasible to build that construction type and maintain affordable housing. Additionally, we've looked at decreasing the parking garage area in order to increase the dwelling unit count. However, this gives us limited to no gain in dwelling units based on the constraints of the site, the parking deck, ramp design, and construction requirements. That's all that I have. I would then ask to turn it over to the next speaker, which I believe is Matt Haas.
The next registrant is indeed Matt Haas, Horizon Drive, Verona, Wisconsin, in support wishing to speak, also representing Lincoln Avenue Capital. Matt, you have 3 minutes.
Good evening. Can everyone hear me?
Yes.
Perfect. I'm Matt Haase. I'm with JSD Professional Services representing Lincoln Avenue Capital on this project, and we are providing the surveying, civil engineering, and landscape architecture design services. Can you please pull the same presentation up and go to the next slide, please? As mentioned previously, in order for the developer to meet the goals and total units committed to WIDA, an alternative to the original street layout was investigated and is proposed before you tonight as a substitution. As summarized in this slide here, we believe the substitution meets all the same objectives as the original mapping street layout, with a couple positives in reference to the substitute map. Next slide, please. To further investigate the two street layouts, we worked with Traffic Analysis and Design, Inc., better known as TADDY, to prepare a traffic study. The traffic study was completed to compare the original versus the substitute with regard to the impact to the railway crossing. Specifically, we looked at the potential traffic queuing impact to see if traffic would back up across the railroad tracks. The study looked at each layout and applied multiple different intersection control strategies to study the sensitivity of the queuing distance or backup distance to the railroad tracks. Some general traffic counts were used in this analysis as provided earlier by the city and conservatively estimated based on some recent traffic counts. City stated that the traffic volumes anticipated for the east-west connection were about 5,000 vehicles per day, and we have very conservatively estimated the volume to be 10,000 vehicles per day on the north-south connection from Ruskin all the way up to Huxley. The 10,000 vehicles per day matches a 2018 count on North Sherman Avenue, which parallels this connection just one block to the west. As shown in the exhibit here on this slide, this is the worst case scenario with the original street layout version providing a queue length of 125 feet, which is approximately 5 cars, leaving just under 300 feet from the last car to the rail crossing. This is the worst case scenario and assumes an all-way stop condition on this intersection. Next slide, please. Similar in this study, we also looked at multiple different intersection control methods. And in this slide, you're seeing the worst case scenario of a intersection control as a stop at the westbound approach only. This produces a 150-foot long queue distance, approximately 6 cars, leaving 275 feet to the rail crossing. This is very similar to the worst case scenario of the original street layout option with regard to backing up traffic towards the railroad corridor. Next slide, please. Another item to note is the safety of, back one slide, please. There you go. Another item to note is the safety of pedestrians and bicycle crossings at the 2 proposed intersections. We've anticipated the location of the multimodal paths as shown in the green in the exhibit.
That concludes your available time. Thank you, Matt. The next registrant is Kyle Brasser, Wilshire Boulevard, Santa Monica, California, in support and wishing to speak, representing, again, Lincoln Avenue Capital. Kyle, you have 3 minutes.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Thank you, members of the Planning Commission, for your time and consideration this evening. My name is Kyle Brasser, and I'm a Vice President and Regional Development Partner at Lincoln Avenue Capital. Just to complete what Matt was just about to finish, could you please pull up the presentation again and go to this slide 10? The slide that was being shown, Matt was going to explain that the safety components of both railroad crossing areas are very similar, and in fact that the T intersection actually provides some safer crossing components and some safer traffic calming measures due to fewer opportunities for conflict among the various forms of transportation. Could you go to the next slide, please? And so to provide a summary overview and conclusion of our presentation, the city of Madison, like the rest of the country, is facing the problem of a sustained lack of affordable housing. Our development proposal will bring 550 units of affordable housing serving families and seniors. We have been able to preserve the favorable QCT treatment through WIDA that will make this development feasible. That treatment will expire and lacks flexibility, so it is important that we maintain our density and our schedule. We are committed to making this development mutually beneficial for the many involved stakeholders, which is why we collaborated early on with the neighborhood groups and the city on this proposed substitute street layout. Next slide, please. As explained throughout the presentation, the substitute layout provides for more efficient development sites. It preserves our ability to develop 550 units of affordable housing. And without this substitute, we would lose at least 80 units of affordable housing. The substitute provides for 15 acres of natural and conservation area. It provides for comparable safety for all modes of transportation when compared with the original version, and the T intersection in the new version, the substitute version, is safer due to fewer opportunities for conflict. It also provides, the substitute version provides for very similar railroad queuing length in even the worst case scenario. And a couple of other things to note, just to avoid any confusion, the proposed substitute mapping does provide a connection to the north via Huxley, and the proposed Roth-Packers connection in the substitute version takes place in the same location as in the original version. Lastly, as explained by staff, the railroad approval process is an unknown. And according to our engineering consultants, the substitute mapping alignment is equally sufficient for railroad approval. I urge you to recommend approval and vote for approval of the substitute street mapping. Our entire team is here to answer any questions that you may have. Thank you.
Thank you, Kyle. The next registrant is Jennifer Argelander in support, wishing to speak, Erie Court, Madison. Jennifer, you have 3 minutes.
Thank you. I'm speaking in support of this substitute street mapping as proposed by the developer, supported by Alder Abba, Sherman Neighborhood Association, Friends of Meyer, environmental groups, and the Northside community. This well thought out street design would have the least impact on existing diverse plant, animal, and tree life, and would maintain at least 15 of the 16 acres promised for this conservation area, which includes a functioning wetland. There would be less concrete surfaces resulting in less damage to the natural area, less damaging water and salt runoff, and less maintenance for the city. Less impervious surfaces would help address Madison's climate, carbon, and clean water goals, as well as equitable, safe, walkable access to a nearby nature for a rapidly growing neighborhood and area school kids. In addition, the substitute road would avoid encouraging unsafe cut-through traffic next to the natural area and senior and low-income housing. The original map design would reduce the total space for senior and low-income housing units, cut back on the natural area to less than 13 acres, put unneeded streets right next to the natural wetland boundary, and it would destroy the critical mature tree line and damage the bur oak trees to the north. The new street alignment would protect the ecologically important mature tree line, which currently does still have healthy large trees that support natural area biodiversity and sustainability. Although it may look a little messy, a conservancy is not supposed to look like a golf course. The birds and animals which the old tree line supports need that area for critical shelter, habitat, and food source. And removing a mature tree line and planting young trees is a ridiculous argument. It would take decades before those new trees could replace any significant percentage of the carbon and environmental loss caused by destroying mature native trees. It sure looks like the city is trying to ignore the developers and community wishes. Although we in the community, the elected affected businesses and the developer really would prefer no through street, but access to the development, we came together to support a compromise substitute road. And I'm asking, please, for the city to come to the table and accept this compromise road, which would be a win-win for everyone. Please do the right thing for the environment, for the community, for local business, for developers, and for the rich biodiversity found in this area. Thank you.
Thank you, Jennifer. Our next registrant is Marcia Cannon, Cherokee Circle, Madison, in support and wishing to speak. Marcia, you have 3 minutes.
Hi, am I heard?
Yes.
Okay, good. I would like to propose that you vote to adopt the developer compromise at Meyer Wetland. That's agenda item 4, version 2, and agenda item 5, version 3. First of all, ask yourself why. Why does the plan?
Marcia, we cannot hear you any longer.
Marcia, it looks like you muted yourself.
Oh, it was a mistake. I'm sorry.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay, ask yourself why. Why does the planning department insist on the X street layout when the developer, the neighborhood, and the aldermen all support the T format? Why, when more housing is a community priority, does the X plan support the loss of 80 senior housing units? Ask, why does the perceived highest probability or best chance for a railroad crossing location outweigh every other consideration? Why hasn't there been a Vision Zero evaluation of the two street layouts to determine which plan puts safety over speed, supports community, fosters sustainability, and is most equitable? And why are all other parties except for planning being ignored in deciding the quality of life for future residents in 550 units at Meyer Wetland? Why not save everyone's time and just vote to adopt Agenda Item 4, Version 2 for street mapping and Agenda Item 5, Version 3 for the conservation zoning? Thank you.
Thank you, Marcia. We have some other registrants that do not wish to speak but are available to answer questions. Joan Bell Cole, Esh Lane, Madison, in support, not wishing to speak but available to answer question. Representing LEAD, Next Door Environmental Nature Wildlife Group. Jamie Kelly, West Broadway, Monona, in support, not wishing to speak but available to answer questions. Representing Lincoln Avenue Capital. Brenda Klecker, Ruskin Street, Madison, in support, not wishing to speak, but available to answer questions. Are there questions for any of our registrants? Alder Heck.
Thank you. I have first a couple of questions for Kevin McDonald. There he is.
Yeah. Hi, Alder.
Kevin, there was talk about WIDA and the qualified census tract designation, and I just want to make sure that I understand that. You mentioned that it gives you more flexibility, and that you think that you could lose that designation if you're precluded from developing on the footprint that you're advocating for, or was it just that it gave you less flexibility? Could you explain that?
Yeah, so it's kind of complicated because the situation we're in with an expiring qualified census tract is one that is fairly unique. So when at the end of 2021, when the qualified census tract expired, we submitted our bond applications that identified the approximate size of the two developments that we highlighted here. And with those sizes, basically, as things move forward, we cannot have a substantial change from our bond applications on the developments that end up moving forward. So reducing our senior development from 250 units is a risk, because it could be deemed that it was such a change that qualified census tract is no longer available. And so it is a gray area, but it is something that we know we cannot lose many of the units to preserve that qualified census tract. I would also ask, Kyle Brasser might be able to piggyback on that response, because he has even more experience on the expiring qualified census tract. This is frankly the first time this has ever happened on a development that I'm working on.
Well, given that we're not really reviewing your development proposal at this time, I think I appreciate your answer and understand it. Just a couple more clarifications, though. So you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I guess flexibility is the right answer. You're just decreasing your odds. It's not that you're automatically disqualified. You're decreasing your odds of being able to retain the WIDA funding stream that you're anticipating for. Do I have that right?
No, we're not. So if we weren't able to do enough of the senior units, if we couldn't get close enough to the 250, that development in its entirety could be deemed as ineligible for the qualified census tract because it would stray enough from the initial bond application that's already been approved.
But you don't know that for certain. You just know from experience and other people you're working with that it decreases your odds of success and that you could get closer to being disqualified. Correct?
Correct. I mean,
Okay.
if we lose more than the 10 to 15 units, it's very likely that it would not be able to move forward with the qualified.
Would that be for both the family and the senior, or only for the senior that you?
There's enough space on the family side, but I guess I'd also highlight that our whole purchase agreement is contingent on buying the entire site and both developments moving forward. So
I understand. So just a couple more questions along the same angles. You've qualified for this WIDA funding, and you talk about having an agreement. If all things proceeded, you're not involved in a competitive situation. It's essentially, you will get this funding that you're worried about. If all other things proceed as you anticipate. It's not a competitive process. Is that right?
More or less. Again, unfortunately, it's complicated as well. The 4% tax credits the process we're going down is not a competitive process. That is 100% true. What is uncertain is the availability of bond financing, that we can't move forward with our full tax credit and combination bond application until we have zoning in place. And so the tax exempt bonds are a very limited resource, which in the past have never been limited, or in Wisconsin, we've never approached our tax exempt bond cap. As of within the past 12 months here, the 4% tax credit was fixed at a 4% rate, which has made developments like this more financially feasible in Wisconsin. And so WIDA does have some concerns, and actually throughout this process, there's been a number of developments that are looking to do similar developments like this throughout the state that have kind of moved ahead of us. And so there is some worry actually from WIDA that at some point they may run out of the tax exempt bonds. So hopefully that answers your question. So it does.
I think I understand. I think I understand. Thanks. One more short question. Are you seeking funding from the city or the county or other public resources for this project? Will you be?
We are planning to put an application in for TIF funds as well. The one thing we're waiting on there is knowing where the streets are going to go so that we can finalize our timeline and our actual development concept and put together financial projections in order to present the TIF package.
And not from the city or county affordable housing funds?
We will not meet the current goals of those plans. So, or we wouldn't score well. We definitely meet a lot of the goals, but we wouldn't score competitively enough for a number of different reasons.
I understand. And thanks to commissioners for your patience. Those are my questions.
Thank you, Alder Heck. Commissioner Solheim.
Thank you. I was wondering if Matt, the engineer, could speak. He was cut off a little, and I think Kyle got some of it, but that slide that compared kind of the two scenarios, I was just kind of wondering if you could walk through that again, and then also describe where the data for that came from, if you used a third-party firm, or kind of how that came about.
Yeah, absolutely. If the presentation could be brought back up, and I think yep, this is the slide. So what I was going through is here's a comparison between the original version and the substitute version, and what was identified in our traffic analysis as the worst case scenario for traffic to be backed up at the intersection. In the original version, the worst case scenario is providing 125-foot long queuing distance, which is about 5 car lengths. In general, between the original and substitute version, this wasn't originally mentioned, but noted on both of these graphics, the distance between the center of the intersection to the center of the railroad is almost identical at about 470 feet. I think the substitute has about 475 feet. So they really are identical in that respect as well. In the substitute version, the worst case scenario for queuing that we analyzed is for a westbound stop only. So there would be a stop sign at this Packers Avenue connection coming up to the north-south Ruskin-Huxley connection, and that produces a 150-foot queue, which is about 6 car lengths. And again, still gives us about 275 feet from the last car to the center of the tracks. So the analysis that we did, and then I'll get into talking about where this data came from, who we used. I can talk a little bit more about that. But the analysis we did was specific to the street layouts and their impacts to the railroad crossing with regard to if traffic would back up and create unsafe conditions at that crossing. And what our analysis reflected is that does not occur in either version, and the substitute version really is very, very similar and equivalent to the original version. So our study, we used TADDY. If you're familiar with them, they're a well-known traffic engineering and analysis firm here in the state of Wisconsin. They do a lot of work for the DOT. I know they've done a lot of work in the Madison area and throughout the state. And so we utilized their services to assist preparing this analysis. So I don't know how much more in depth.
Commissioner Sol?
Yes, it does. Thank you very much, Matt. I appreciate it. That's all I have right now.
Okay,
Sure.
thank you. Commissioner Fernandez.
Yeah, thank you, Chair Zellers. This is a question for the development staff, and I have to apologize. I missed. I've heard the entire public hearing, but I missed earlier presentations. We had a power outage here, which included my internet and my ability to charge my phone, et cetera. But I'm very involved in this issue and have. But my question is this: for someone on the development team. Possibly Kevin, you've been involved in studying this for some time. Traffic engineering has been involved in laying out the road pattern for some time. Can you talk a little about the sequence there? Has there been another point in this process when your team has had input on the road design? And has there been were there other opportunities for input until this point on how those roads would be aligned?
Yep. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
All right, great. Well, I guess first off, big thanks for all the collaboration that we have had throughout this process. I guess I will say that when we initially met with city staff in the fall of 2021, winter 2021, we did identify and point out some concerns with the street patterns. And this was part of my presentation, so you may have missed this part. But
I think he said that he was here for all of the public hearing. Is that correct, Commissioner Fernandez?
That's correct.
Yeah.
Okay.
So
and I was flying through it. So, okay. So, yeah, at that point, we did express concerns over the street pattern. We were told that was the street pattern and that was moving forward. So then, once we were told that, we were working to try to see if there was a way to make things feasible. And then at the Common Council meeting that happened in March, that's when we heard from the neighborhood group and then worked with Alder Abbas to try to find a collaborative solution in a street pattern that would work for everyone. And we really think we've done that, as noted by Matt, the traffic and engineering railroad consultant has concluded that there's about an equal chance for both of the railroad crossings to be approved. So, and we feel really positive that the solution that we've worked through with the neighborhood, who is obviously behind it, well, especially from the testimony we've heard tonight. And it's just really a great solution that increases the amount of park space.
Commissioner Fernandez, has your question?
I think my question is answered. Thank you, though. I appreciate it, but I have the info I need. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Alder Heck.
Thank you. I just have a question for Matt Haas, the traffic guy.
Yes.
Matt, in your public comment, I believe you said that the T intersections were safer. Can you expound on that?
Yeah, so generally speaking, as compared to a four-way intersection, I believe like a four-way cross intersection, you might call it, has about 36 points of conflict. And those points of conflict are merging or converging, diverging, and crossing conflicts as you maneuver your way through the intersection. Obviously, different control measures can help mitigate some of those conflicts. But generally speaking, like a three-way T intersection has, I believe, I'm trying to remember it off the top of my head, it's about 18 conflicts. So you have less turning movements, less diverging and converging conflicts. And so with less conflicts, there is a statement that could be made that intersection is a bit safer to cross.
Can I because the substitute has two T intersections, can I add 18 plus 18 to get the same number of 36 for one four-way crossing?
I see where your math is headed. I would specifically note that once the pedestrians or bicyclists, if they cross at the first, I'll call it like the southern T intersection, they're generally going to be on the west side of the street and then heading further west. So I think the likelihood of just adding all of those conflicts up to make 36 doesn't necessarily make 100% sense.
I see. Thanks. I got it.
Yeah.
Just one more quick follow-up. Your conflicts are about pedestrians and cyclists only, or do they include vehicular conflicts?
So those conflicts are kind of include all modes of transportation. I guess you could say it's not specific to just cars or pedestrians or anything like that, but there's up to that many conflicts.
Okay, that's my questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Alder. Commissioner Cantrell.
I guess my question is for the member of the development team. I'm assuming you have a contract to purchase the site that you're looking at. or at least some sort of commitment from the property owner?
Matt, could you respond to that, or let us know who on the development team could respond? Matt, you're.
Oh, I'm still unmuted. Okay.
Yep.
I believe Kevin and or Kyle Kevin McDonald or Kyle Brasser would be best to answer that question.
Okay, Kyle.
I'm here.
Yeah, could you respond to that question, please?
We do have a purchase contract. That's correct.
Well, it appears that the cul-de-sac area, the area that has the current railroad crossing, I'm assuming that will be vacated, and that in order to get the new railroad crossing farther south, why wouldn't you just go back to the property owner asking for a larger site to the north? Do they own the property to the north? I'm assuming
they do not own the property to the north. Different owner across the cul-de-sac.
Okay. Well, the cul-de-sac will be vacated, so that will provide at least some additional land for your site, for the senior site. Not a lot, but some. It also appears that you're kind of fast tracking this. And during the testimony we had in the original plan, people raised a lot of environmental issues. Have you done the environmental analysis of this property that you're looking at purchasing and remediation and all those sorts of things?
We are working with the WDNR currently. We have submitted an initial remediation plan. Until we know where these buildings are going, that's about as far as we can go, but we have a pretty good handle on the remediation. The timing, there's a couple different things I do want to just respond to on your comment about timing. First, fast, I wouldn't say we're fast tracking it, but as explained earlier, this QCT preservation through WIDA has a sunset on it. And so we need to stay within that. But the other timing component, which is a little bit separate, has to do with the vacation of the cul-de-sac, which is you'll notice in both of these iterations that you see, we are not showing the use of any of that vacated cul-de-sac, because it's our understanding that won't be made available until such time as a railroad crossing is approved, which from what we understand could be 2 to 5+ years down the road, which would be much farther down the road than this development needs to begin. City staff may have further information on how long something like that takes to be approved, but I believe it's multiple years down the road. So we really can't rely on that for the development, unfortunately.
Okay. Thank you for your information.
Is that all of your questions, Commissioner?
That's all for now. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. Are there further questions of registrants? Any further questions of registrants? Seeing no raised hands, I will close the public hearing. Are there questions of staff? Commissioner Solheim.
Thank you. I do have a couple of questions. Following in the presentation, the slides that Matt went over with their kind of traffic analysis, I know it is mentioned in the staff memo, the railroad consultant that the city reached out to. Did you receive a report or anything from that consultant that we could refer to in this? I didn't see anything on Legistar, but I want to make sure I didn't miss anything.
Bill, are you the one to answer that, or if not, who? Oh, I see. Dan McAuliffe. Okay.
And Chris Pedikowski is also from City Engineering available as well.
Okay. Dan?
Yeah, so we had an initial meeting with the consultant that the city's used for railroad crossings. So at this point, it was a somewhat an informal discussion, just trying to understand the likelihood. And kind of what we heard from that conversation was the railroads would likely look more, or the Office of the Commissioner of Railroads would likely look more favorably on the original alignment as opposed to the alternative that's being considered. But there's not an official report or anything at this point.
Okay. Did they provide any I guess, exhibits when you went over. I'm just kind of wondering if, the numbers or the analysis and thought process of that was the same.
Yeah, so I think that one of the things that they strongly thought was helping the case, and I'll certainly welcome any comments by Chris Bedakowski as well, is because there is a realign, if the existing proposal goes forward, it would very likely be considered a modification of the existing crossing due to the realignment of the street. That is different and kind of what could be an important detail than creating a new crossing that would be on Coolidge Street and removing the crossing at Roth Street. We also talked briefly about traffic control that would lead to the most likely, again, trying to what would be the most favorable for the purposes of the application, and that would likely be a stop sign on the north and the southbound directions, but a through movement on the east and west.
Okay, thank you.
Chris, I was just going to see if Chris had anything to add. Chris, do you have anything to add to that response?
No, excuse me, Dan. Dan did a good summary there.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, very good. Go ahead, Commissioner Solheim.
Thank you. I guess I see on the slide how you mentioned that under the original alignment, it would be considered likely a modification of the existing rail crossing, not a new crossing, as you mentioned. But I guess I'm not quite clear as to why the alternative also wouldn't be a modification if the actual crossing is in the same spot. Can you clarify that?
It would be due to the fact that Roth Street is just shifting south versus removing the crossing at Roth Street and putting one at Coolidge Street. If that makes sense. So it's like it's a different street, even though it is in the exact same location.
Okay. I had one more question regarding the eventual vacation area. Not necessarily the cul-de-sac, but I was actually wondering about the space just to the west, I guess, that little section. When that is vacated, would there be able to be development over the vacated area? I know that sometimes vacated streets can still have like utility easements, so you can't develop over it. And I'm mostly asking because that could create kind of a funky triangle if you cannot develop over that vacated area.
I think that's a great question. It certainly could be that new infrastructure is put in place along the realigned Roth Street. If that's the case, there would be no development restrictions on that property. Certainly, if there is utilities that need to remain, there would probably be some sort of access easement required. However, those can certainly be used as driveways or in some certain open space that is also required. That's typical of the residential development that we'd expect on that triangle. Just for reference, the triangle, even without the additional space that could be afforded through vacation, is still approximately the size of the triangle blocks downtown. So if you think about those, it looks a little smaller in this area, just given the scale of the blocks, but it is still a significantly developed property. Maybe not so with the scale of buildings that this developer is proposing, but certainly developable.
Okay, thank you. That's all I have for now. I may have two more follow-ups. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Fernandez. You've got to unmute yourself, Commissioner. Okay.
Yeah, I apologize. My question was answered in the course of the previous question, so I should have taken my hand down.
Okay, very good. Commissioner Mendez.
Yes, I think I have two questions here. So the first question is, have the property owners, for staff, have the property owners been notified with the official map being redone that they would have restrictions put on their buildings and other things now, and it's not going to be a surprise to them? So have they been notified?
Yes, they have.
Okay. So then kind of along that line, I think Commissioner Solheim kind of alluded to this too. What's the timeline of vacating the roads for the new construction? Is it 2 years down the road that we kind of heard, or are we looking at a longer term?
So I believe there's probably a couple things that could go on. I believe, specifically on Ross Street, the bulb of the cul-de-sac could be vacated. We could do that if there's the city's desire to do so at any time. That's not really serving a major transportation need. It's really just so you can turn around. The balance of the streets would be vacated upon achieving the crossing of the rail corridor. So we believe that we start with the north-south street. The likelihood would also build the local stub to the rail corridor. When we pursue approval and granted the approval, we know that we no longer need those stub streets right there, and then they can be vacated.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Fernandez.
Yeah. So I have to ask one more, what may be a somewhat uncomfortable question of staff, and this may be for Chris or Dan. So we've heard a good bit about the crossing and the likelihood of the OCR approving the alternate proposal. If that issue were to be considered a wash, let's say, we got expert testimony from somebody that said actually either of those is approximately equally likely to be approved by the OCR. Are there other really major reasons why we would need the T intersection as opposed to the two we would need the cross intersection as opposed to the two T intersections? In other words, is this hinging largely on the OCR question? I think when I asked this question, when this came up before, there was some suggestion that offset intersections are a negative, but really this is not an offset intersection. There's 300 some feet, I think, between these two intersections. There was some suggestion that because the east-west route was a transit route, that was significant, but I just want to, it just feels like, can you put some meat on the bone of what else besides the likelihood of OCR approval is really at stake here in maintaining this first alternative?
I see that Sean Malloy had his hand up first. Sean?
Yeah, I'll start with the answer to that, and then others can join in. So, from traffic's perspective, the original option is a safer alternative, especially for peds and bikes. The offset T, does have fewer conflict points for the vehicles, but going east to west, that introduces two turns and crossing two more crosswalks than you would if it were the standard intersection in the first option. So, from that, we would definitely prefer the first option. There's a possibility that Metro Transit could be running a route down the streets. Obviously, for their operations, they like to reduce the turns if possible. And I guess I would like to put in perspective that our estimate for the East-West Street was about 5,000 trips. I was just looking at our kind of our flow map here, and that's about what North Street is. That's kind of a nearby example. Commercial is not too far off from that volume too. So I guess 5,000 vehicles is not a small number really. And having all of them have to do two turns rather than go through, is certainly better from our perspective. Another thing that I guess wasn't touched on the railroad, I know this question was supposed to be without the railroad, was that we do have flexibility with this with the first option. We can either go with a four-way stop or two-way stop, and pretty easily switch those options if we need. based on, what the railroad wants. So, I would say it's more of a flexible option than the offset tees as well. Because then you're kind of locked in. Typically, the intersection that's teed in is stopped, and the other street goes through. It'd be atypical to do anything different. So from that perspective, I'd say the option one keeps us more flexible and is better for us in that regard.
Thank you, Sean. And just to clarify again, Sean Malloy, for everybody, it's from traffic engineering. So go ahead, Commissioner Fernandez.
Yeah, thank you, Sean. Just a quick follow-up. What's the estimated volume? The 5,000 is what, design year? Or I don't know exactly what year you're attaching that to, but what's the estimated volume on the North-South Street?
I believe that was similar, but I'll defer to Dan on that.
And Dan does have his hand up. So Dan?
Thank you. So the original traffic projection on the east-west street was 5,000 cars per day. We prepared that one specifically because we were very focused on Coolidge. You might recall through the plan development's time, the Coolidge was initially conceived during the draft phases as a four-way intersection. We certainly wanted to understand the impact into Eakin Park. We did not prepare a traffic estimate for the north-south. I'm also going to jump backwards one question, just kind of put some more meat on the bones, as it was referred to, for the safety issues. Couple movements that come to mind specifically for me. When you're crossing on a bike, you are going to take a right turn and then you have to move over to the left to make a left turn. It's somewhat odd. But also as a pedestrian using sidewalks, it's been my experience that right turning cars at T's can be problematic for pedestrians. And this has been my experience from a couple times. As some of you may know, I do run regularly. And a lot of times what I've seen very frequently actually is at T intersections where a car is making a right turn, they will look left, see no traffic is coming, and proceed through the intersection. So if you're a pedestrian coming from the right, it's very often that you are not seen. And so that is, again, one of those movements that, again, brings me to believe that the four-way can certainly be a safer intersection for bikes and peds.
Thank you. Are there further questions of staff? Commissioner Cantrell.
I guess a question about neighborhood planning. If staff was drafting, obviously they drafted a neighborhood plan here initially, and they provided a through street. Would this be where a collector street would fall within this between commercial and Aberg? If there was nothing else here, would this kind of be where the staff would be looking at a through street, a collector street?
Dan?
Yeah, I'll answer that. And, I think a lot of our, design decisions are informed by our most highly pedestrian areas, where we see the greatest amount of pedestrians in our city. Those, of course, occurred before the areas that were platted before the advent of the automobile becoming really prevalent in the city. So in our core area, those blocks are relatively small. They're very walkable. And what we see is, well, not every through street needs to carry a volume of traffic, but there are there is a need for that connectivity. In this particular case, we're looking at about a half mile between through streets, those being commercial and Aberg. We do see the need for a connection. As we've kind of mentioned before, when we see that need for connections, we looked at the intersection system. As we mentioned, we do feel that the four ways work better than two ways. So that's kind of how the design came about.
Okay. Thank you.
Did you have any further questions, Commissioner?
No.
Okay. Alder Heck.
Thank you. This is for Dan also, I think. I want to make sure I understand where in the process we are with regard to street mapping. This could be for Bill, I suppose. We hear in these conversations, even with the Oscar Meyer special area plan, these are just reservations, and things could always change between now and when the roads are being built. And now it seems we're pretty much deciding where the road is going to be for sure, unless this development proposal doesn't move forward. I suppose then there could be other variables. But we also heard in public comment a reference to Cedar Street to the south of the new SSM Health facility in South Madison. And that does seem like kind of a good analogy. It was like a pressing need to put a street in a plan, a street mapping that actually is going to turn in quickly, if it hasn't already, I don't even know, into that actual street in that configuration. Can you explain maybe why this is different than Cedar Street, the Cedar Street situation?
So it looks like Bill Fruling is going to be responding. Bill.
I will take the lead on it. I see Tim's hands up. You might want to chime in, but I think the difference is, as you saw in those initial slides of the plan development, our plans typically do include future streets, as did the Oscar Meyer special area plan. Actually, if you recall those first slides, there are a lot of future streets proposed in this area, really to provide a framework for development and to break down those large blocks to make it more walkable and bikeable, like Dan was talking about. The difference is, the city is moving more towards using official maps to lay out those reservations for those very few, very important street alignments. And, we did not officially map all the streets that were in the Oscar Meyer plan. In fact, we only, are recommending officially mapping the ones that are before you tonight, plus one that was over in the Shopko Drive area that was also part of the planning area. And so Cedar Street was not officially mapped, I believe. It was just included in a plan. And I'll also note that, in the Oscar Meyer special area plan, in the area where the potential development that's being talked about, there were some other streets that were in there that, that the developers are not proposing to install because of the scale of their development. And that's not something that we're not pushing for those streets. It makes sense with their development, but those key important streets that are officially mapped is the difference between this and Cedar Street. So I hope that helps answer that.
Did you have any follow-up, Alder Heck? Or does that do it?
No, but if Tim Parks has something to add,
okay. Tim.
Just jump in very briefly and note that to build on Bill's comments that, official mapping, is part of an iterative process that takes us from an area plan to eventually what we hope will be reality in terms of building a street. And there are some pretty important differences between the reservations that we're talking about tonight and what transpired with the Wingra Triangle build plan implementation since that build plan was adopted in 2005. One of the biggest ones is that the city acquired contemporaneously to the adoption of that build plan, one of the key pieces of property needed to implement the Cedar Street connection west of Park Street. That's not something that's currently on the table here with the former Hartmeyer property. But it factors into how that street became a reality versus how these streets might become a reality. In this case, official mapping is just a reservation. It's not where exactly the street will be built. We need to acquire the land and fee for what will ultimately get built, whatever configuration. That can happen through dedication to the city through a subdivision, or it can happen through an acquisition by the city through a relocation process. So in either case, to go from the plan to reality, there's going to need to be the city having control of those rights of way. And then ultimately the street would get built, which again, that's not something that is directly before the Plan Commission tonight. That will come later. The platting or acquisition would both come to the Plan Commission as resolutions that would require a Plan Commission recommendation before the council took action. The construction of the streets would happen either through a developer's agreement or through a city-led infrastructure project. So a lot of steps to follow tonight, but this is basically taking that plan adoption, plan recommendation, and the direction that the council gave us 2 years ago, and taking it forward an important step. And to Bill's point, that's not a step that we were directed to take in 2005 when the build plan was adopted. But again, the implementation there has been different, in part because we controlled some of the important land and we were able to work with SSM Health on the alignment west of the city controlled property. So how those puzzle pieces came together there versus how they're coming together here are fairly different. So I'll stop there. Thank you.
Thank you, Tim. Did you have something additional to add to that, Dan?
Yeah, I would just like to also say there's a level of detail, additional detail that we see that engineering, TE, and engineering division are putting into the official map streets. We certainly work with those partner divisions during plan development. We make sure, kind of looking at what is being discussed and giving us guidance. However, when we move into official mapping, we need to be sure that those streets are going to be buildable. And that's when we're going to look a lot closer with engineering, make sure the curves are just right. Because what we don't want to do is encourage building footprints in around those areas and then find out we can't build the street in the location that we said we were. So again, I think we're just taking a much finer tooth comb review of these streets through the official mapping process.
Thank you, Dan.
Thank you. That was my question.
Okay, thank you. Are there any further questions of staff? Seeing none, I would be looking for a motion. Commissioner Fernandez.
Thank you. So I'm going to move adoption of substitute for the official map and the second substitute for the zoning. In other words, basically,
we're just taking the agenda item 4 right now.
Just 4. So, okay, for 4, I will move adoption of the substitute map.
Is there a second? Seconded by Alder Curry. Commissioner Fernandez, did you wish to speak to your motion?
Yes, I would like to, and I do this with some difficulty, having been city staff for a long time. I want to first of all really express deep appreciation for the thoughtfulness that went into the original city plan, and actually complete agreement that in the perfect world that that X intersection is probably a better solution and certainly a better for the east-west traffic. However, I don't find the reasons for that really compelling, and I want to just go into a little bit of detail on that. First of all, on the issue of the OCR approval, again, I don't want to contradict anybody. I think that the recommendation from the city's consultant sounds like it was quite informal and offhand. I have personally experienced with a great number of OCR hearings, and all of them successful as far as I can recall, both before I was with the city and in my 17 years with the city. And my reading of the situation is that the substitute is equally certain to be opposed by the railroad, because that is their perennial stance. But it is also equally likely to be approved by the OCR. The OCR is a good body that actually looks at the facts of the situation and makes a decision on the importance of a crossing. And I think, in fact, I feel very confident that they will see the importance of this crossing, will recognize that it is no net increased number of crossings. That's extremely important to the railroad. A new crossing that is truly a new crossing in addition to an existing one is going to be very vigorously opposed by the railroad, because they want no additional crossings. However, this is going to be, I think, seen by the railroad and the OCR as almost an identical proposal. In fact, they probably won't even look beyond the boundaries of that intersection itself. They will note that it's no additional crossing. So I think that argument is, in my opinion, I don't see any greater likelihood of approval of this with the original proposal versus the substitute. Regarding the safety of it, again, there are some good arguments for an X intersection, certainly the flexibility with traffic control. With regard to pedestrian and bicycle safety, again, I'm going to just speak from my experience. I was the city's largely bicycle design was my portfolio for 16 years or so there. And in addition, many, many years as a bike commuter. And the devil is in the details. But there is nothing inherently more dangerous about a T intersection than an X intersection. And in fact, probably less so, because even if you were to encounter all 36 potential conflicts, which, as was pointed out, you're not actually going to encounter that, but to encounter fewer of them at one time is actually quite an advantage for bicyclists. Almost any T intersection can be made at least as safe as any cross intersection. And again, this is just personal experience, and I'm not going to, I don't want to position myself against traffic engineering on this one, but I will say personally, I don't have any problem as a bike commuter looking at those two T intersections if they're designed properly. I live on a street that's very similar, and have traversed it thousands of times, a whole series of T intersections. And I have no concern about that. And also, the north-south street is, from a planning standpoint, from a bicycle standpoint, the more important street here. We have long sought a north-south bicycle route in this area, so I give a certain plus to the substitute version for north-south bicyclists. Even though I agree, if you take all the movements into account, you're probably coming out even. So given all that, even though there may be some marginal advantages to the city's original proposal, I'm very persuaded by the importance of the affordable housing. And I feel that the responses we got from the developers were very astute and complete. I would be very loath to risk losing what I think is a rare project, in my opinion, and I feel that the street configuration is, while I may be wrong on the actual balance of which is better, the difference is not significant enough, in my opinion, to risk losing this very important development.
Thank you, Commissioner. Are there further comments? Alder Heck.
Thanks. I'm just going to speak to the motion. I'm very reluctantly going to support this motion. And I think Commissioner Fernandez's remarks are primarily why I'm going to do it. I don't typically like to go against city staff, particularly when at least 3 different departments are recommending the original map that was out before us. But I also have doubts about the project moving forward. That's kind of on the periphery of our discussion. I think it's entirely possible that won't move forward. Not certain at all, but there's a fairly decent possibility that just because of WIDA or a million other variables, we don't know that this will go through. But that said, I think the risk is probably worth taking. And I also have problems with some of the claims that, we're saving all these trees by doing this, because I think Parks understands trees and will take out 80% of those trees, like they said, and that's appropriate. I also have issues with the way this whole thing has been handled from the beginning. I wish a lot of these discussions would have taken place before they came before us, and before the items came before us, and that would have been helpful if those had happened. I think staff did a fantastic job of engagement and trying to have those discussions, but I think there were some pieces missing, but no fault of staff's. So that's where I am on this. Thank you.
Thank you, Alder Heck. Alder Abbas?
Yeah, thank you so much. Just to be very clear, I appreciate all the staff for their work. And I would also like to add a couple of positive things in the substitute, beside increase of wetland area and affordable housing project, which is extremely important. I think so. Another aspect of substitute is, let me turn on my camera so you guys can see me, how I look. So 705 Ruskin Street. I know last Plan Commission meeting, Commissioner Solheim voted against the plan when it came to Common Council because the staff official mapping is cutting through their building. So this substitute basically protect that building as well. And it does not cut through their building as well. So it does have, that's an additional benefit beside increase of conservation land and increase of affordable housing. I just want to point that out as well. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Cantrell.
Well, I'm going to be voting against the motion. I think that we have a rare opportunity on this side to put the roads where they should be, and it's unfortunate that we're balancing the roads against the affordable housing project, and it's not a given that the affordable housing project will be even approved or eventually implemented, but obviously there's a hope that it will happen. But I think there's a lot more advantages to having a through street as staff has proposed than having a disjointed intersections as the other concept is, from the transit, from pedestrians, and from bicyclists. I'm not an expert in those, but I think that I have to rely on staff recommendations in that regard. And it's unfortunate that we're kind of hard pressed here, and we're kind of being forced to make a decision for or against a proposed affordable housing project and a street alignment that we all agreed upon some time ago. And I guess I agree with staff in this regard. And so I have to vote against the motion. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. other thoughts or comments? And I would note that we do have 8 people here now, so the motion would need 5 votes in order to pass. Okay. Again, any further comments? If not, we will come to a vote, and I'm going to ask Kevin to do a roll call because we do have at least one person who is voting against it. So if you could do a roll call, I would appreciate it.
Sure. Thank you, Chair. Roll call. Alder Heck.
Aye.
Commissioner Fernandez.
Aye.
Commissioner Solheim.
Aye.
Commissioner Spencer. Oh, sorry, you're muted.
No.
Commissioner Cantrell.
No.
Commissioner Mendez.
Aye.
And Alder Curry.
Aye.
So I have the ayes. I've got 5 ayes and 2 noes.
Motion passes. Moving on then to agenda item 5, Legistar 69517, second substitute, creating sections of the Madison General Ordinance to change the zoning of property located 200 Roth Street, 12th Alder District from Industrial General District to Conservancy District, and creating sections of the Madison General Ordinances to change the zoning of the property located at 2007 Roth Street, 12th Alder District from Industrial General District to Traditional Residential Urban 2 District, and creating sections of the Madison General Ordinance to change the zoning of the property located at 701 through 705 Ruskin Street, 2007 Roth Street, and 1810 and 1834 Commercial Avenue, 12th Alder District, from Industrial Limited District to Regional Mixed Use District. And I believe that Tim Parks will be commenting on that. Tim?
Yes, Chair, members of the Plan Commission, based on your action on item number 4, please note in the memo that you should now be recommending approval, presumably recommending approval of the zoning district polygons that correspond to the alternative street alignments that are included in substitute resolution 69519, which was your item number 4 just a moment ago. So therefore, number 5, which is ordinance ID 69519, you would want to recommend adoption of the second substitute for that item to the Common Council, as those zoning district polygons correspond to the alignment that you just recommended in the previous item. So if there are additional questions, I can answer them after the public hearing.
Thank you. We do have a few registrants indicating that they wish to speak. The first is Paul Nolander, Kensington Avenue, Kensington Drive, Maple Bluff. He registered twice, once as opposed and once as support, wishing to speak, representing Friends of Hartmeyer Natural Area. Paul Nolander, you've got 3 minutes.
Chair, there's no person in attendance by that name.
Okay, he must have left. The second registrant is Barbara Nolander, also Kensington Drive, and she also registered twice, once oppose and once support, wishing to speak. Is she registered?
Chair, there's no person in attendance by that name.
Okay, thank you. And also registering, wishing to speak, Jennifer Argenlander, Erie Court, Madison.
Hi, I just wanted to say that I do support this substitute amendment, just so it goes along with item number 4. That's all.
Okay.
They go together. Yeah, I'm
Okay.
just supporting.
Thank you.
Sure.
And then other registrants that we have not wishing to speak. Joan Bell Cole, S. Lane, Madison, support, not wishing to speak but available to answer questions. Marcia Cannon, Cherokee Circle, Madison, support, not wishing to speak but available to answer questions. Brenda Klecker, Ruskin Street, Madison, opposed, not wishing to speak but available to answer questions. Are there questions of any of our registrants? Seeing none, I will close the public hearing. Are there questions of staff? Seeing no raised hands, I would be looking for a motion. Commissioner Fernandez.
I will move approval of the second substitute.
Is there a second? Seconded by Commissioner Mendez. Commissioner Fernandez, did you wish to speak to your motion?
No, I don't think so.
Okay, thank you. Any comments? Discussion? Seeing no raised hands, we'll come to a vote. I will assume unanimous consent unless I see a raised hand to object. Seeing no raised hands, the motion does pass unanimously. Thank you. Next is agenda item 6, Legistar 71221, creating sections of the Madison General Ordinance to rezone property located at 222 and 230 Mary Street, 6th Alder District, from traditional residential urban 2 district to traditional residential urban 1 district. And Kevin will be telling us about that one.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Yeah.
I'll just do a very short staff overview. And just note, this is an Alder-sponsored zoning map amendment sponsored by Alder Benford. The purpose of the amendment would rezone the subject property from TRU2, the traditional residential urban 2 district, to the TRU1, or traditional residential urban 1 district. This request is not tied to a redevelopment of the property. Again, it's an Alder-sponsored request. The site is currently developed with a 22-unit building. And based on feedback from zoning staff, as it's understood right now, it is not believed that rezoning would create a non-conforming zoning situation with the proposed zoning. From a plan consistency standpoint, the site is recommended for low residential development in the comprehensive plan. Low residential development is generally up to 16 units an acre and includes single, 2-unit, and 3-unit buildings. Small residential buildings with a recommendation for up to 30 units an acre are included as part of this recommendation in certain situations, including situations where they already exist. From a context standpoint, the TRU2 district is a much more intensive district, and some of the allowable development intensities were increased last summer with the modifications to the zoning code. As it stands right now, the TRU2 zoning district would allow for approximately a maximum density of 124 units per acre. Previously, that was 86. The TRU1 zoning district, which is proposed, would allow for a recommended or a maximum density of approximately 58 dwelling units per acre. As far as the recommendations, they're very similar in terms of the bulk. However, one of the more significant features is the lot area requirement for the TRU2 district. Again, this helps with the density calculation. The TRU2 district requires a minimum of 350 square feet per dwelling unit, and the TRU1 requires 750 square feet per dwelling unit. Staff is supportive of the development and is available to, of the proposal and is available to answer questions after the public hearing. Thank you.
Thank you, Kevin. We do have some registrants. I'll open the public hearing. Bruce Bosman, Commercial Avenue, Madison, opposed and wishing to speak. Bruce, you have 3 minutes.
Bruce, you should be seeing a prompt to unmute. There you go.
I'm seeing it now. Sorry, I took a moment to find my reading glasses. Bruce Bosman, Chairman of Apex Real Estate. We've owned the subject properties for almost 25 years. We don't have any intentions of proposing anything to change the configuration of the 22-unit building. However, we have proposed a development along Winnebago Street that and we've met with city staff and with Alder Benford about it, if this rezone is enacted against 230 Mary Street, it would make the proposal that we have put forth not workable. 230 Mary is currently vacant. We would like to do a building with 34 units facing Winnebago Street, using about half of the 230 Mary Street parcel. We would like to provide underground parking that would serve 222 Mary Street and the new building. If we can't build with sufficient density on the portion facing Winnebago Street, then we can't get enough parking to serve the 222 Mary, because we can't dig down very far because of the water table. So I'm opposed to this because it's being done preemptively prior to any proposals, and I feel like it should be at a minimum tabled until the proposal that we have can be viewed by this body, rather than preemptively telling us that we can't build. To me, it's very interesting that the adopted neighborhood plan, which shows up on the city's website, provides that this is listed as medium to high density residential. So you're going to be downzoning it below the adopted neighborhood plan. Those are my comments. I guess I look forward to some questions.
Thank you, Bruce. The next registrant is Jeremy Mannheim, Mary Street, Madison, in support, wishing to speak. Jeremy, you have 3 minutes.
Hi. Yeah, so my name is Jeremy. I'm a Mary Street resident, and I'm strongly in favor of the proposal to take the zoning from TRU2 to TRU1, as are pretty much every neighbor I've spoken to up and down the block. We're all strongly in favor of this. And so there's various reasons for it, some of which we've outlined in the letter that we sent to the Plan Commission. But what I want to speak to is simply from my own experience as a resident, that when you come off of Winnebago, which is busy street, and you turn onto Mary Street, something kind of extraordinary happens. You know, some residents want to talk about a rural feel, some talk about it as an oasis. However you talk about it, something changes. Suddenly you can hear the bird. And all the houses along this area have these low open porches, so you have the feel of walking down a country lane. And what I want to stress to the commission is that, of course, those of us who live here care about this. A lot of us moved here because of this, but that what continues to surprise me is how much this little green pocket matters to the larger community. Just sitting on my porch, working in the yard, I'm astonished at the number of people who don't live on the street, who are coming down Mary Street for no other reason. This is a dead-end street, right? There's no way out. For no other reason than to be on Mary Street. The dog walkers will walk down to the end of the street to the rain garden and turn around, as will joggers. Couples in the evening holding hands will just go down Mary Street and then turn over to the river. there's something valuable here that's just having that green space, that quiet space right in the center of the developing, exciting East Side is a value to the Marquette neighborhood, to the East Side, and to Madison. Thank you.
Thank you, Jeremy. The next registrant is Ann Walker, Winnebago Street, Madison, in support and wishing to speak. Ann, you have 3 minutes.
I support the agenda item number 6 to rezone 222-230 Mary from TRU2 to TRU1. I agree with Alder Benford, former Alder Rummel, and city staff that TRU1 is more consistent with the low residential designation from the comprehensive plan. Neighbors from Mary Street participated in the comprehensive plan process, and the Capital Times reported on that participation. And what the quote was is, residents said the street, which runs parallel to the Yahar River, offers a unique rural feeling close to central Madison, while also providing wetland-like runoff reabsorption functions, which would be compromised by additional development, end quote. This is a unique location. The Yahar River functions as a place where a lot of stormwater from the other parts of the neighborhood gets directed, and this can cause the river to rise, and quite a bit at times. We're also directly below the Tenny Locks, and when Lake Mendota becomes too full, the locks are open, which can also lead to flooding in our area. My neighborhood has flooded many times. The first time I saw my neighborhood flood was 1993. I sent some pictures to the Plan Commission. I hope you all received them. I know that Commissioner Cantrell, you bounced, so my apologies. But I sent some pictures from the neighborhood and the floods and 222 Mary. This is from 2004. It's flooded many times, and the flood of 2018 was much worse than previous floods, and required the help of city staff, the National Guard, volunteers, and many, many, many sandbags to protect neighbors' homes. And we are very likely to flood again in the future. I strongly believe this should be a factor in your decision tonight, as well as for the BRT bus rapid transit overlay zone. I do not support infill development in flood-prone locations, and I do support the consideration from this commission and the city of the creation of flood overlay zones and flood mitigation zones.
Does that conclude your testimony?
That does.
Okay, thank you. We have one more registrant wishing to speak, Robert Proctor, 2 East Main Street, Madison, opposed, wishing to speak, representing the Realtors Association of South Central Wisconsin. Robert, you have 3 minutes.
Oops, I'm sorry. Can you hear me?
Yes.
I unmuted and my whole computer stopped. So, okay, thank you. Yes, Robert Proctor. I'm the Public Policy Director for the Realtors Association. And we oppose the downzoning of property when the property is already consistent with the comprehensive plan, the owner objects to it, and that when the purpose is simply to reduce density on a preemptive basis. One question I would ask is, I was a little confused by the report from staff and the numbers of density. It's my understanding that TRU2 allows for 36 units by right, and TRU1 up to 22. And so I'm not sure if those are the numbers given, but that's what I saw in the staff report. We recognize the concerns of homeowners, and I often think that it's disrespectful to use the term NIMBY. And because I think that all of the points that were brought by the neighbors up are very valid points. That, of course, that I know the area, I used to live in the area, and it's a beautiful area. And that I understand that there's been issues with flooding. However, when the city looks to downzone property without a plan, it has no way to know whether there's any basis to the facts as to whether the new use will create a traffic problem or a stormwater problem or a parking problem. There are many plans that could come forward for this property that may not cause those problems, that may not take away from the beauty of walking down Mary Street. And when you don't see it, when you don't see a project, it's just guessing. And then when you're just guessing, it's really just about density. There is just so many myths about density that the sense that if there's any more additional units, that it will cause flooding or traffic or parking issues just because there's more density is not a fact. It may be, but until you see an actual proposal, it's not a fact. And that is why it is almost unheard of for the city to allow a property owner to come in and say, I would like to upzone my property, but I have no development to show you. And it would be almost never that you would see that. So we oppose the city has just gone on after the mayor's Housing Forward initiative, passed an ordinance to create more density under TRU2, which is pretty modest density, and to now start preemptively dismantling the ability to use that density before a property owner has the ability to even come forward with a plan, we think is wrong. And I had not heard before tonight that there actually is a potential plan, a plan that it sounds like would not change the part that faces Mary Street, but only would change the part that faces Winnebago. But
thank you, Robert. That concludes your available time. We have a couple more registrants available to answer questions. Randy Christensen, North High Point Road, Madison, opposed. Not wishing to speak, but available to answer questions. Representing Apex Properties, Mark Ott, West Broadway, Monona, opposed, not wishing to speak, but available to answer questions. Representing Apex Investment Group. Are there questions of any of our registrants? Seeing no raised hands, I will close the public hearing. Are there questions of staff? And first, I would ask, Kevin, could you clarify Robert Proctor's question about the staff report, please?
Yes, well, I think there's a couple of different density measures that were discussed. And I think the measure that's referenced in the staff report, and I'll verify that in a moment, had to do with the threshold between permitted and conditional uses. And I believe in the TRU1, which is the proposed district, the threshold is 24 units. So a development more than 24 units is a conditional use. In the TRU2 district, I believe that threshold is over 60 units. Is I believe the numbers that and Tim Parks could also jump in if you had anything else to that. But I believe those are the conditional use versus permitted use thresholds.
Okay, thank you.
And the other density threshold is lot area. That was the one that a development needs to have a certain area per dwelling unit, and that is in the TRU1, the proposed district. That is 750 square feet per dwelling unit is what's required on a site. And in the existing TRU2, that's 350.
Okay. Thank you. Commissioner Cantrell.
I have a question about what the comprehensive plan identifies this area. I remember that we had this specific area we discussed, I think it was in the comprehensive plan. And the staff report says low residential. Is that correct?
That is correct. There was discussion on this property, and I believe when the final recommendation went through, it was low residential was the final recommendation in the comp plan.
And the neighborhood plan is medium high, or is it in conflict with the comprehensive plan? And I'm assuming if it is, it's older. It's an older document.
I'm not certain what neighborhood plan was being referenced. I believe the plan. I can verify or look at that, but I'm not aware of of a neighborhood plan that's more contemporary than the comprehensive plan in this area.
Okay, so the comprehensive plan identifies this as low residential, and the TRU1 is more consistent with that. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Thank you.
Commissioner Fernandez.
Thank you. Just to clarify, Kevin, so the existing zoning, would you say it is inconsistent with the comp plan right now?
Well, it allows for more. It allows for greater density, as the comp plan ranges are generally broad and include several use types. So the low residential district includes a range generally between singles, twos, 3-bedroom units, and then up to small apartments. There's a provision in the low residential areas that small apartment buildings, generally up to 30 units an acre, could be allowed in certain situations. And one of the items that are called out are items where developments that are already existing. So in that case, you can certainly do that in the TRU2 district. However, the densities are much higher than what's ultimately recommended as part of that low residential district.
Okay, thank you. And then just help me out. So we heard the densities for the TRU2, 170 dwelling units per acre, and the TRU1, 58 dwelling units per acre. Can you turn that into an absolute number of dwelling units for the portion of this property that remains undeveloped? Is that a possibility? I mean, are we looking at an acre, a quarter acre, 2 acres? I'm not sure.
Sure. Let me estimate if you can bear with me a moment, I can get you a rough estimate of the size of the other property. So bear with me 1 second on that. And again, with just a rough estimate, it looks like the 230 property itself is about 0.28 or 0.3 acres. So, under a third of an acre, around a third of an acre is that size. Just from a square feet, it's roughly over 12,000 square feet. So again, if you were going to say in the TRU1 district, you could have a maximum, you would need 750 units, 750 square feet per unit. And then in the existing TRU2, that figure is 350 square feet per dwelling unit.
Okay. That answers the question. One additional question on the question of flooding. Is there any reason to think that a TRU, the existing zoning, creates a higher risk of flooding than TR1? I mean, are we actually reducing the flooding risk in any way at all by approving this?
This would not impact stormwater regulations or other floodplain regulations. The bulk standards, I believe, are very similar. I would want to defer to our zoning staff. But as far as the zoning change itself, wouldn't create any changes to the stormwater ordinance as far as how that would be implemented, I don't believe.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Solheim.
Thank you. Quick follow-up on that flooding question. It's my understanding that after one of the more recent floods, I believe that the city kind of updated some of the base flood elevations for this area around East Wash. So would it be correct to say that any future, development of this parcel would be subject to whatever the most updated flood elevation is?
I don't know if I see Chris Petakowski from engineering is on. I'm not sure if he could speak to that item.
Chris?
I'm sorry, could you repeat the question?
Of course. So I believe that after some of the more recent flooding, the city updated some of the base flood elevations that would include this area. Is it correct to say that any future redevelopment of this parcel would be subject to, updated or current flood elevations?
I don't have that information readily available to me. And I'm not sure I could get it super quick either. I can get it early tomorrow, but I don't have it with me at the moment. I'm sorry.
I guess if you could.
So Tim Parks has his hand up. Do you want to comment, Tim?
I do. I apologize. I didn't mean to leave Kevin answering all the questions, but I'm having some computer trouble. I think the answer to Commission Member Solheim's question is yes, they would have to comply. And to add to that, that would be the case regardless of the zoning.
Yep. Great. Thank you. That's all I have.
Thank you. Are there further questions of staff? Further questions of staff? Seeing none, I would be looking for a motion. Commissioner Cantrell.
I'll move that the Plan Commission forward the zoning map amendment to this of 222 to 230 Mary Street from TRU 2 to TRU 1 with the recommendation of approval.
And do we have a second? Is there a second?
Okay.
No second.
Okay. Good luck.
Any other motion? Commissioner Cantrell. Commissioner Solheim.
I move that the zoning map amendment be placed on file without prejudice.
Is there a second? Seconded by Commissioner Fernandez. Commissioner Solheim, do you wish to speak to your motion?
Yes. I believe that the existing zoning, while the TRU1 may be closer to the comprehensive plan, both TRU1 and TRU2 are accepted as zoning designations for this area of the comprehensive plan for low residential. And to be honest, I'm not particularly comfortable with the precedent of moving forward with the zoning map amendment that's not allowed with, or that's not in line with the property owner's wishes when the property with the existing zoning can meet the comprehensive plan. I feel like that's unnecessary, and we can wait for a future proposal if it may come. But in the meantime, the existing zoning meets the comp plan.
Thank you. Are there further comments or discussion? Alder Heck.
Thank you. Yes, I think this is exactly the motion that's appropriate. Another thing that I was thinking that is that the property owner and the alder don't appear to have engaged sufficiently on this. Perhaps they have. I could have asked the property owner, I suppose, but it seems like there hasn't been a discussion about what will fit on the property if it is indeed changed to the lower category. So I think there's room for some discussion, and that's why I think placing it on file without prejudice is appropriate. Thanks.
Thank you, Alder. Further discussion? Commissioner Fernandez.
Yeah, I just want to also support the motion. I'm very uncomfortable with the precedent of preemptive downzoning, particularly at a time when we're overall looking for greater density. So I could certainly see it in respect to a particular proposal that had difficult aspects to it, but I think preemptively downzoning it does not feel in tune with what we've been doing in most of our other actions up till now.
Any further comments before we come to a vote? Seeing no raised hands, we will come to a vote. I will assume unanimous consent unless I see a raised hand to object. Commissioner Cantrell has indicated objection. Anyone else wish to be recorded as voting against this motion? Seeing none, motion does pass with one dissenting vote. Moving on to agenda items 7, 8, 9, and 10. And I will mention, as it says in the note preceding these, they're related and we will consider as one public hearing. Following the public hearing, the Plan Commission shall make separate findings and motions on each agenda item. And I believe that Kevin Furco may have a comment about that too. And Kevin will be giving us an overview of the proposal. Kevin?
Thank you, Chair Zellers. I think the note on the agenda and you summarized the action we're recommending the Commission take procedurally is that after the public hearing and after deliberations that we do get separate motions on each of the 4 requests that are before the Commission. So those requests before the Commission, this item includes a zoning map amendment from the SE to the TE, that's from the suburban employment to the traditional employment district. It involves the conditional use consideration for dwelling units in mixed-use buildings for food and beverage units and building heights exceeding the maximum 5-story height in the district. So 3 conditional uses before the Plan Commission, a demolition permit for the Coliseum Bar. Please note in regards to the demolition, when the Plan Commission last saw an earlier version of this, there was also a demolition and a relocation request for the Wonder Bar next door. That is not part of this request. It is only the Coliseum Bar. So only one building is proposed for demolition. And finally, the 4th request before the Plan Commission on this item is the certified survey map to combine the properties into one lot. As far as the proposal itself, it is a 12-story building with approximately 13,500 square feet of commercial space and 192 apartment units. Staff notes in the staff report that the site is recommended for employment uses in the comprehensive plan, and the recently adopted South Madison plan recommends regional mixed-use development for this site. Staff believes the various approval standards can be found met. Again, does request that the Commission make separate motions and findings on each of the items before them, and staff's available to answer questions after the public hearing. Thank you.
Thank you, Kevin. I will open the public hearing. The first registrant is Lance McGrath, Williamson Street, Madison, in support and wishing to speak. Lance, you have 3 minutes.
I have a slide presentation to pull up?
One moment. Oh, Tim's got it.
There we go. Thank you. Well, good evening, everyone. So we're the developer of the project, and I am going to be the only presenter tonight. So I'm going to go through these slides pretty quickly. Apologize for the rushed presentation, but please ask questions once I'm done with more details needed. Next slide. Site is located at the intersection at John Olin Drive and East Olin Avenue, about 1.5 acre site total. Next slide. So the nuts and bolts of the project, as Kevin mentioned, we're doing we're splitting the current site into 2 lots through a certified survey map. The Wonder Bar will be sitting on 1 lot, and the new project will be sitting on the 2nd lot, and it's going to be a 12-story post-tension concrete building. Next slide. All access to the site comes in off of Olin Avenue. The driveway to the right is a one-way in, and that's primarily for drop-offs and deliveries. And then the main access is a two-way driveway on the left. Next slide. Zooming in at the more of a close-up look at the first floor, starting in the lower left-hand corner, the brown area, that's our lobby and some amenity space. And then going to the right, the green areas are our commercial space, wrapping around three sides of the building. Top middle, we have our bicycle storage that'll connect out to the multi-use path. And then the blue area on the top left is our parking deck, or parking ramp. It's access from the west side, left side of the building, and ramps up 3 stories. Next slide. This is our 4th floor, which is our first residential level. The brown area is a community room that opens up to a common terrace. Next slide, please. And then that floor plate repeats up to level 12. So these are levels 5 through 12. You'll notice the sawtooth stepping on the east side of the building as a design feature. Next slide, please. This is our civil site plan. We recently modified this to address staff comments about extending the multi-use path along the northern edge of the property. Next slide, please. These are some concept sketches from our architect, just kind of showing the genesis or the origination of it, their design concept with the layering effects of the building. Next slide, please. I'm going to walk real fast through some of these renderings. This is inbound John Nolan Drive, just past the intersection. Next slide. Outbound John Nolan Drive, looking east. Next slide, please. This is Olin Avenue with the Wonder Bar in the foreground. Next slide. This is a close-up of our lobby. We have a copper anodized metal panel that starts outside and continues inside and creates a relationship with the Wonder Bar. Next slide, please. And this is an elevated view of the project looking towards downtown. That's 3 minutes.
Thank you very much, Lance. The next registrant is Jeffrey Richter, Cliff Court, Madison, opposed, wishing to speak. Jeffrey, you have 3 minutes.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, I'm Jeff Richter, resident of South Madison. I'm active in the South Metropolitan Planning Council, but I'm not speaking on their behalf. What I am speaking about, though, is the fact that as a volunteer with the South Metropolitan Planning Council, I was involved in getting public involvement in the process of doing the South Madison Plan. And as it was recently adopted, it allowed for greater than 5 stories and a change in zoning. However, that proposal was brought in, those 2 additions were made after the public input was complete. And I really believe that this is really disingenuous to be working on a proposal like this in zoning that currently does not support this kind of development. It limits it to 5 stories. And I think that the employment district label that it has right now is appropriate for the area and does its service. The public input on the South Metropolitan Planning, on the South Madison Plan, it emphasized affordable housing options, lower density residential development, owner-occupied housing options, and they sought options to avoid gentrification, and they were looking to have developments both support the ethnically and income diverse nature of our community. And this proposal does none of those things and is, in fact, antithetical to it. And it doesn't benefit the community. And the fact is it's being planted in the midst of 5 parks. And, I really wonder how the commission members would feel about a proposal like this if it was going to be towering over Vilas Park or Elver Park or Warner Park. This was a hastily changed plan, the South Madison Plan, and without community support. I'm opposed to the conditional use permit changes and the zoning changes. I did sign in to speak on each of them, but obviously I'm just speaking on the one. And but I would support a 5 to 6 story proposal for this site. I believe that that would be community sized and appropriate for the neighborhood that it's being put into. And the idea that it has any relationship to a land use map or plan, is the thing is the AEC master plan and the AC destination district plan, those are not adopted by the city. And so the current zoning is suburban employment, and it doesn't permit the buildings that are primarily residential. I don't think this building should be approved or any of these changes at this point in time. And that's what I have to say.
Thank you, Jeff. The next registrant is Carrie Rothberg, West Lakeside Street, Madison, opposed, wishing to speak. Carrie, you have 3 minutes.
Hi, it says I'm unmuted. I'll start. I submitted 2 letters earlier today to the Plan Commission that were submitted last time round on the 26th of July, and in support of my opposition for all of the items having to do with McGrath's development tonight. The proposed building of 12 stories is as out of compliance with the city's standards of approval for development for conditional use as it was at 18 stories and should not be approved. I mean, recall that the Plan Commission put this development on file because specifically it was out of compliance. The attached 3 letters that I hope you'll have the chance to look at specifically refer to standards 3, 5, 9, 12, and 32 to lay out the reasons that the Plan Commission should not rezone the site from SE to TE, should oppose a conditional use for dwelling units, as Jeff explained, in an employment district, should oppose conditional use for a building exceeding 5 stories with 192 apartments. McGrath's proposal is to erect a 12-story building on a site that, per the city's comp plan and land use map, allow only 5 stories. We're jumping through a lot of hoops here, rezoning as suburban employment, as TE, and then asking for conditional use when suburban employment does not permit buildings that are primarily residential. That's why we're having this conditional use proposal. And as Jeff said again, justifying this on the grounds of the AEC, master plan or destination district plan, plans that are not approved by the city, is just plain bogus. Also, these plans support human scale development of 8 stories in the destination district. I won't go into the South Madison plan because Jeff covered that. In short, there were 44 letters submitted last time around to Registrar File 65653. 34 of those opposed to the development on the grounds that it's out of character with the neighborhood, that it would have a negative impact on park users, wildlife, and birds, that it is out of compliance with employment zoning, and that it does not create the sort of affordable housing options needed in South Madison. Add to that it looks like an institution, which is what residents, neighbors said at the last meeting with McGrath. You may not hear from many people here today, many neighbors. That's why I'm referring you to those 44 letters. Most people are so fed up and so disillusioned at not having a voice in the South Madison plan and at the fact that this development is back looking much like it looked before, despite the fact that neighbors asked to work with McGrath on it, that I ask you, please, as commissioners, to enforce the standards of development for conditional use and to turn down this proposal, to vote it down and ask for something that is much more suited to the community. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next registrant is Helen Kitchell, Potter Street, Madison, opposed and wishing to speak. Helen, you have 3 minutes. Is there a Helen Kitchell registered? You have 3 minutes.
Is this Helen?
Helen Kitchell?
Helen is Lisi.
Okay, so Lisi Kitchell, you have 3 minutes.
You are unmuted on our end in Zoom. You may have a mute on your microphone or headset. best thing I suggest is exiting the meeting and coming back with the link that you joined with. If you don't have a mute, your headset or microphone muted.
So you're suggesting that she exit the meeting and then try coming back in?
Correct.
Okay. Then we will move on to the next registrant, and hopefully she'll be able to figure it out. Jim Winkle, Emerson Street, Madison, in support and wishing to speak. Jim, you have 3 minutes.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm grateful that the McGrath Property Group is still pursuing this development, and I support it. We need more housing of all types in Madison. I live in Bay Creek, and we've talked about this project over the past year. I've heard and learned quite a bit about density and recently wrote an article about it. And here are just a few of the things I learned, some of which I'm sure you know. There are still undesirable activities happening in the nearby Olin-Turville Park. We want more legitimate uses of it to push out the less desirable ones, and hopefully the many residents who will be living close to this gem of a park will enjoy it. I've heard differing opinions about the bird-safe glass requirements. We were told requirements were being dropped because of a pending lawsuit, but then we were told by McGrath at the last meeting that it was still being enforced. So I'm hoping the latter is true, or that the final plans included voluntarily. Also, regarding bird glass, studies that I've seen state that the first 5 stories is where the vast majority of bird strikes occur, and that a tall building is actually much better for birds than the equivalent number of shorter buildings, like single-family homes. If that's not always true, and birds generally fly higher near a park, then I'd love it if more bird-safe glass were included. A tall building on a major corridor makes a lot of sense from an environmental perspective. It's close to major centers of employment, so hopefully it'll attract workers who desire short commutes, perhaps by bike. Building up instead of out prevents more flooding, which you all just talked about, and preserve valuable green space elsewhere. Yeah, I'm also disappointed there's no affordable housing included, but I know naturally affordable neighborhoods immediately to the south of this will benefit from this development. It will slow the gentrification of those neighborhoods, which is already happening. I personally know people who have moved into those neighborhoods because of the supply of housing in my neighborhood. Bay Creek is low. Our neighborhood assessments have gone up 17% in the past 2 years, partly because the demand for housing feeds the supply. So in closing, Madison is adding 2,800 people per year. We need to build the equivalent of roughly 7 of these buildings every single year just to keep up. While I'm not a fan of modern architecture, my biggest complaint about this building is actually that it's not bigger. Thank you.
Thank you, Jim. Our next registrant is Janelle Munns, West Lakeside Street, Madison, opposed and wishing to speak. Janelle, you have 3 minutes.
Yes, hello. We worked very hard to save the Wonder Bar last year. Almost 4,000 people signed the petition to save the Wonder Bar. It seems the Wonder Bar has just been an inconvenience for this developer. Firstly, they were willing to walk into our neighbourhood that does not have a lot of historic buildings, and we're ready to knock down this beautiful building and its rich history to the ground. And now they have proposed a building so out of place next to it. The first thought that came to me when I saw the plans was it makes the Wonder Bar look like a pimple on a giant's face. When the developer presented the new 12-story proposal to a neighbourhood meeting, the word institution to describe how the building looks was used by many people. The ideas and suggestions that were provided in the past in the petition comments and at neighbourhood meetings to build something more in character and scope to the Wonder Bar have mostly been ignored. I feel they did have a I feel they did have an opportunity to build something that played into the past while looking to the future and possibly have one of the coolest spots in town. There are apartment buildings going up all over town. When I drive around, I'm thinking, well, what used to be there? We can't keep up. And of all of these buildings, many of them have tried somewhat to blend into the surrounding older buildings with the use of brownstone and brick. Most of these new buildings would look more appropriate next to the Wonder Bar than this light-coloured institution-looking building. With the thousands of units being built all over town, mostly market-rate apartments, is it not possible that the need for this type of high-rent apartment housing is overinflated? Especially when you consider the scope of this building, 12 stories will be looming over Olin Park. We are very lucky here in Madison to have these natural areas in the city centre, and I feel it's a shame we would compromise the park with a building of this height, casting its shadow over the park so valued by Madison citizens. It will be visible from all around Monona Lake, the surrounding natural areas, Monona Bay, Vilas Park, the Arboretum, and Lake Wingra. I urge the Plan Commission to consider that the height of this proposed building is inappropriate for the location adjacent to Olin Park, and that development proposed is in poor taste to be constructed right next to a historic Prohibition tavern we worked so hard to save. Thank you for your time and consideration.
Thank you. Is Helen Kitchell back on? Helen, you have 3 minutes.
Again, Helen, you are unmuted in Zoom.
Helen?
Helen, I see your hands up. Yeah, we can't hear you. You are unmuted. So, as I said before, if you've got a mute button somewhere on your microphone or your headset, if you could look for that. Otherwise, we can't do anything else on this end.
Okay, I'm afraid we're going to have to move on since that is not working. Are there questions of any of the registrants? Commissioner Fernandez.
Yeah, thank you, Chair Zellers. So this is a question for Lance McGrath. And I notice in the conditions, it says something like, or awfully close to, that the developer shall construct a 10-foot wide bike path along the north edge of the property in an easement sufficient to for the city to maintain that. Is that understood as a condition by you? And I'm going to ask the same question of staff because I may have misunderstood the conditions, but that appears to be a condition right now being placed by city engineering. Is that your understanding?
Yeah, we saw that. And so early on, we met with staff in traffic engineering and came up with an easement area in the northwest corner of the site. And then as time went on, we got some more feedback in recent weeks about the need for the easement area to extend along the entire length of the site and to be wider than what we were having. We had like a private sidewalk before connecting to it. So we modified that recently to have an 8-foot wide multi-use path that goes along that north end. And that was based on discussions with Chris Pedikowski yesterday or Friday, talking about that. And Chris, I think he had indicated he'd be open to talk about that also.
let me follow that up just a minute. Are you talking about an 8-foot wide public path?
Yeah, correct. Yeah, it would be a city easement. We'd be building the path, and then the city would take over the maintenance of it as through an easement. And as of right now, it'd be a path to nowhere. But the idea is that in the future, it's going to connect to development that proceeds going to the west towards Windber Creek and heading over towards the intersection of Olin and John Nolan.
So, as I looked at that situation, I don't know exactly what you're envisioning as a easement width, but I took this to be a very major comment, and it looks to me like if you were to provide, say, a 14, 16-foot wide easement, whatever it would take to hold an 8-foot path, and I would, as a bike designer, say it's not going to be less than that. It seems that would preempt the rain garden, and it would also remove quite a number of parking stalls. Are you prepared to do that?
No, I think what we're proposing that showed up on one of our slides, and maybe we can pull that up. It would be probably slide 7 or 8. That would show where this path is currently being proposed. And if we, what Chris from engineering was talking about last week is that, if we're building it, typically the city wants a wider easement area because they have to, work on the grading and drainage. But if we're putting it in and dealing with that, that's not as important. And then, there's room for the 8-foot wide path, but not much room more than that. Otherwise, we definitely start losing our landscaping and the infiltration basin. So you can see the gray there, that's the paved path that runs from east to west.
I see, and it's only 2 feet from the actual building. Am I correct?
Yeah, at that location, yes. And then it's 2 feet from the property line on the northern edge along the railroad property.
Right. Okay, thank you. That answers my question for you. Thank you.
Yep.
Did you have any other questions, Commissioner Fernandez?
I don't, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Mendez.
Yes, thank you, Chair. This is her Lance again. In your presentation and in some of the comments that we saw in the public comments and the staff reports, the building facade, it's been referred to by some folks as kind of being this Goliath, kind of just all steel or windows or concrete. Would you have any plans on changing or upgrading some of the facade to incorporate different colors that may be incorporated in the arena district or the surrounding area?
I'm sorry, can you hear me now?
Yes.
So we went to urban design last week and got both initial and final approval. And overall, I felt they were quite pleased with the building. And, architecture is such a subjective thing and everybody has personal opinions about it. We think the building looks great and we got a lot of positive feedback from urban design. And that's kind of their forte, what they're looking at. And overall, this is a really high quality building. It's a post-tension concrete construction, built to last a really long time. All the materials on the exterior are very durable, metals and masonry. So we're very happy with the building we're proposing and don't really think we need to go back and look at different color iterations at this point.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Mendez. Are there further questions of our registrants? Seeing no raised hands, I'll close the public hearing. Are there questions of staff? Commissioner Fernandez.
Thank you. I have a couple of related questions. The first one is, the proposal here is still for employment and then a conditional use, but this is primarily a residential. is there possibly a better zoning designation to reflect what is being proposed here? And then let me ask even a broader question. There seems to be really a vision issue here, which is many people cite the recommendations of the South Neighborhood Plan, home owner occupied, affordable. There are a lot of words in that plan that do seem to be inconsistent with what we have here. And yet, I see that staff is fairly strongly supporting this. I think as a precedent, we're likely to see a lot of tall, primarily residential, primarily not affordable housing type units come in here. So that's one possible vision for this area, but it does seem to be somewhat in conflict with the plan. Could you just comment on that general question?
Kevin.
Sure, and I'll let I think Tim could also follow up on the plan questions. As far as the zoning question, as far as the TE zoning district versus others, there could be potential mixed use districts that would work. They haven't been tested, so I don't know specifically what it is or what that might be. The TE district does allow for this use. Mixed use buildings are a conditional use in the TE district, and so. If you think just other applications of the TE district, much of East Washington, that's a very prevalent zoning district along East Washington for a lot of those mixed-use buildings there. So it's certainly another zoning district could be used, I believe, with the conditions recommended by zoning staff, that this zoning district would work for this project with the recommended zoning conditions in the TE district. As far as your plan question, I'll start at a real basic level and maybe see if Tim had anything to follow up with. But the land use recommendation in the South Madison plan is regional mixed use, and that circles back to the city's comprehensive plan. And in the maximum height recommendations there, does have a recommended maximum height up to 12 stories. So based on that reference, I believe the height could be found consistent with that regional mixed use recommendation. And so that's, I think, among the height considerations. And I don't know if Tim had anything further on the plan recommendations.
Not particularly. I mean, you hit the most important ones in regard to the land use and the building height. There are a number of recommendations in the plan, and as is sometimes the case when you talk about a special area plan or a more detailed plan like the South Madison neighborhood plan, compared to higher level plans like the comprehensive plan, you can have some conflict between specific recommendations. The South Madison plan doesn't say that you can't develop market rate housing, but it also includes recommendations that we avoid gentrification and displacement. And in some regards, we are. We have a site that has no housing on it now. It's not displacing any existing housing. It's preserving a building that emerged as an important building to be preserved, while allowing a building that is of lesser importance, architectural importance, to be demolished, the site redeveloped. So staff looks at the totality of the plan and feels that it's consistent. The requests that are before you are consistent, recognizing that in some regards, some elements are perhaps stronger in their consistency and others less so. So I would leave it there and can, build on that if there's follow-up questions.
Thank you, Tim. Did you have further questions, Commissioner Fernandez?
Just only, is there any kind of when you say mixed use, is there any kind of standard for what the ratio of your residential to non-commercial to non-residential use? I mean, does that term convey an implied ratio, or is there an actual ratio ever cited for that? How much non-residential space would qualify as mixed use?
I can start with that one and look to Kevin to backfill. The abridged answer is no. The longer answer is we don't specify what percentages, especially when you talk about a building of the scale that the one proposed is, in terms of how much should be residential versus non-residential, whether there would be how much residential above the ground floor. I mean, we have buildings that really vary in terms of the percentages. Projects like the Constellation in East Washington have, they're probably better known for their ground floor tenants and their upper story residential, but there is definitely an employment component in there that maybe doesn't stick out as much. It just really varies project by project, location by location, how much of a mix you're going to get and what those ratios are going to be. But no, the city does not prescribe that. The only possible exception is we do have in some of our mixed use and commercial districts requirements about what happens on the ground floor. And sometimes that can mean that the uses of the ground floor have to be non-residential, but it's a percentage of those ground floor facades. And again, that's all related to activating the street, but otherwise the percentages of the rest of the building are not prescribed. So I don't know if Kevin had anything else that he wanted to add to that.
No, I think you covered it. The only thing I would just note, it's 50. It does the standard that Tim talked about would apply to the mixed use districts. That standard does not apply to the TE zoning district. Just to clarify that. And then in those mixed use districts, it is 50% of the street frontage. Otherwise, you could have less than 50% through a conditional use review. So does that answer?
I think I understand. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any further questions, Commissioner Fernandez? No. Okay, thank you. Commissioner Spencer.
Thank you, Chair Zellers. I just wanted to clarify, and this is for Kevin or Tim or both. Somebody had mentioned that the South Madison plan was completed with community input, and then later some higher densities, put upon those places. I just wanted to verify, was that because the regional mixed use district was created and approved after the South Madison plan? Is that part of that issue?
I don't believe that the creation of the regional mixed use district really had any bearing on the recommendations in the South Madison plan. And again, we're not using that zoning district to implement the plan recommendation of the same name. But no, as someone who is involved with the South Madison plan process, I really don't feel that the two had any bearing on each other. There was some discussion about whether it was a district that could be used, but I mean that wasn't a focal point in terms of the recommendations in the South Madison plan, which were, I would say, underway, as late last summer, in terms of the evolution of this going from an employment land use recommendation to RMU, and then the height discussion as well.
Okay. All right, thanks.
Any further questions of staff? Any further questions of staff? Seeing no raised hands, I would like a motion. Commissioner Cantrell.
I'm going to move that the Plan Commission find that the standards are met to approve the demolition of 232 East Olin Avenue, that the Commission forward the zoning map amendment, changing the zoning of property at 222.
We're taking them one at a time this time. So we've got the demolition. Is there a second for the demolition? Seconded by Commissioner Mendez. Did you wish to speak to your motion, Commissioner Cantrell? No.
I'll speak at the end.
Okay. Is there any other discussion? comments? Seeing no raised hands, we'll come to a vote, and I will assume unanimous consent unless I see a raised hand to object. Seeing no raised hands, motion passes unanimously. Then moving on to agenda item 8, Legistar 71222, which is the rezoning. Looking for a motion on that. Commissioner Cantrell.
Yes, I will recommend that the Plan Commission forward the zoning map amendment changing the zoning of property at 222 to 232 East Olin Avenue from SE to TE to the Common Council with a favorable recommendation.
Is there a second? Seconded by Commissioner Mendez. Did you wish to speak to your motion, Commissioner Cantrell? No. Okay. Any comments? Any discussion on that motion? Seeing no raised hands, we'll come to a vote. I will assume unanimous consent unless I see a raised hand to object. Seeing no raised hands, motion passes unanimously. Now, agenda item 9, Legistar 70933, which is the conditional uses. Commissioner Cantrell.
I am going to recommend the Plan Commission find that the conditional use standards are met and approve the construction of a 12-story mixed-use building with 13,500 square feet of commercial space and 192 apartments to be approved.
Do we have a second? Seconded. Do we have a second? Wait, Kevin, did you have something that you wanted to say?
I'll wait for a second. I just had a clarifying question.
Is there a second? Seconded by Commissioner Mendez. Kevin?
I would just, as a suggestion to the motion and for the commission's consideration, to say approximately the square footage of the commercial space and the units, just in case something gets modified as development plans go. So it's understood that that's the intent, but there might
be. Was that your intent, Commissioner Cantrell?
Yes, yes, indeed. Thank you.
Thank you. Did you wish to speak to your motion, Commissioner Cantrell?
I guess I'll speak to this motion. Before we have the survey. I think that the developer in this case has addressed the Plan Commission's concerns of this original project. As I recall, when he came forward before, the issues were demolishing the Wonder Bar, which he has now preserved, and the 18-story building the Plan Commission thought was way too tall. He's reduced the building to 12 stories, which is now consistent with our plan, the South Madison plan, and the regional mixed use node that's in this exact spot. I think he's done an excellent job in addressing those concerns, at least that I had, and I think that some of the other commission had at that time before. I think this is a great project. I think it provides housing where we need it. It's going to be a landmark building coming into the city. I think it's well designed, and I would hope that the Plan Commission would embrace this recommendation and support it.
Thank you, Commissioner. Any other comments? Commissioner Fernandez.
Thank you. I want to say I am going to support this motion, and I appreciate Commissioner Cantrell's remarks. I think that this proposal has substantially addressed my concerns at the previous one. My understanding, though, is that this particular item includes the developer complying with the conditions. Is that correct? I don't see it written in there, but implied in this is that the developer will comply with the conditions that were outlined.
Yes.
Is that true? I just want to say in that regard, I think that there are difficulties with these conditions that I wish I had probably worked out with staff earlier. But, a bike path requires certain standards. If it's 8 feet wide, it's not going to be in an 8-foot wide easement. A bike path, by every possible city standard, if the city owns this, has to have a minimum of 2 to 3 foot clearance on either side of it. So you just simply can't build a bike path 2 feet from a building without violating all kinds of design standards here. If the city owns this, I think it's going to be making a very serious mistake because it simply will not meet any standards for a bike path. Safety standards, really, we're talking about obstruction. Nearest obstruction should be 3 feet from the path. I also don't believe that a bike path in this area is actually needed. I believe that what's needed here is a connection at either end to the public lands, which do connect to the public, to Olin Street, or to potentially in the future via the property to the northwest. So I suppose this is my own issue to not clarify this in advance, but I think we've got some real problems with the conditions as they're written here, whether they're going to actually be able to be implemented as written. And they even seem to be sort of internally inconsistent with each other with regard to whether there is a bike path there or there's simply a sidewalk, and whether it's publicly owned and maintained or it's privately owned and maintained. So I just want to say that with regard to that, I hope that there's flexibility in implementing those conditions as this moves forward, because I think there's some real potential problems in those conditions as they're written. So,
Kevin?
I see, I believe Chris might have raised his hand at the same time, or perhaps not. Okay. Sir, just to follow up, that this, in the conditions of approval, it is a recommended condition. The Plan Commission, this is not an ordinance requirement, so the Commission has the ability to make or modify this condition as the approving body on the conditional use. So just want to procedurally note that that's an option for the Plan Commission.
So if you would want to move some kind of an amendment, Commissioner Fernandez, that would be a possibility. Tim, did you have a comment?
Yeah, I just want to jump in and point out that the connection that the conditions are intending to implement was part of the South Madison plan. That the pairing of the paths adjacent to Winger Creek along this site, as well as the mirror path on the north side of the creek, was a recommendation in the adopted plan. So I just wanted to point that out.
Thank you, Tim. Chris?
Yeah, I just wanted to point out that what Commissioner Fernandez has said is correct. Staff originally, myself and Sean Malloy, who's here as well, we recognize the importance of the connection to the Winger Path, which is why the 10-foot bike path and 20-foot easement starts on the far west end of the project there to kind of line up getting over to the Winger Path. And that was, kind of more formally worked out with Lance during the process. I was recently made aware that the South Madison plan had showed this path going through the entire site, which is why I did that. I saw that kind of late in the game, and I talked to Lance last week, and I think what he's drawn kind of essentially shows like the biggest physical path that kind of fits through that area. But there there are problems in having that small of an easement next to that small of a path, as Tony mentioned, which is why I kind of formulated the comment such that if the Transportation Commission were to, allow for something different, i.e., something smaller, then we could have some flexibility and not have to come back to the Plan Commission about with that fact. So that's kind of I guess some of the background there.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Chris. I don't want to try to formulate an amendment here and really second guess engineering. My opinion on this as a bike planner is that we need access from this property to the Wingra path beyond question. But whether we actually need a public path through this property, I'm of the opinion that that's not particularly necessary, because we've got the path along Oland, we have the path along the creek, and I don't see this path functioning as a through path, and I do see it creating headaches for the city if it owns it, because now anytime somebody puts a flower pot within a foot of it, we've got problems, and now we're plowing it. I think there are a lot of problems with that. So I'm comfortable, as long as engineering is comfortable with working this out. I'm certainly not going to push for a public path through there, but I think it's absolutely essential that we do it on the adjacent property so that there is access from this property to the Wingra path. That would be a serious mistake if we didn't have that, since Oland Park is going to be the backyard for this property. I hope that's clear. But anyway, I'm not going to propose anything. I think it can be worked out on a staff level.
Thank you, Commissioner. And thank you to the staff who addressed that. Commissioner Cantrell.
Well, I agree with Tony. I would hope that that staff would work out that path with the developer in this case, and the key is providing access. I guess there is a lot of there's a bike trail underneath John Nolan, and providing access to that, I think, is very important. But also, I agree with Tony that it's really a wide sidewalk that we're proposing here, and that's pretty much okay with me. And I think that that it sounded like Lance McGrath, in talking with the engineering staff, that's kind of what was implied. But meeting a bike trail standard of 10 feet wide with 2 to 3 foot clearance on both sides, that's not going to be what we can have here. And that's not the intention. And if the conditions that we have imposed here require that, I think that they need to be adjusted, or at least that's what I would suggest. So, and that's all I have right now, but I don't know if staff wants to comment on that.
So I'm looking to see if there are staff that... Chris.
Yeah, I think I'm certainly willing to work this out with the developer. I do think that if there was some kind of indication that the commission, didn't necessarily feel like a through standard multi-use path was required through the site, that might help when we go to the board and the Transportation Commission to approve the developer agreement. So, but otherwise, I think we can work it out either way. If you feel, if the commission feels strong that to suggest something like that, that's fine. If not, we'll I feel like there's enough language in the comment that will allow us to work it out with the board and the Transportation Commission.
Okay, well, that's what I think is important. If you feel like that there is the language to go ahead and work it out without being in kind of a straitjacket on that. So hearing that, are you comfortable with that, Commissioner Cantrell, in your motion? Yes. Okay. Okay. I thought I saw Commissioner Solheim. Did you wish to say something, Commissioner?
I was just going to offer an amendment saying that, the Plan Commission would support a less than 10-foot path and easement after further review of staff.
If that would
if that clarity would be helpful.
Okay, thank you. I will take that as a motion. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Seconded by Commissioner Cantrell. Okay, we will vote on that amendment first. Did you wish to speak to your motion, Commissioner Solheim? No.
Nope.
Okay. Any other discussion, comments? Commissioner Cantrell, your hand's up. Did you wish to speak? No? Okay.
I'm trying to. Okay.
Yeah. Okay, very good. Okay, so we will come to a vote just on that amendment. I will assume unanimous. Tim Parks? Tim?
Yeah, sorry. I'm really fighting my computer tonight, so even raising my hand takes 5 minutes longer than I need it to. Are we amending the condition 1 in the addendum?
Correct.
City engineering, both regarding the conditional use and the CSM?
Correct.
So if Commissioner Solheim wouldn't mind just reviewing or repeating her condition, I want to make sure that we're splicing that into that condition accurately.
So I would phrase it as amending that condition to instead say construct a 10-foot or smaller path as determined by additional review of staff and the Transportation Commission.
Okay, thank you.
Anything else, Tim? No. Okay. Okay. Okay, then we will come to a vote, and I will assume unanimous consent unless I see a raised hand to object. Seeing no raised hands, the motion passes unanimously. Now we are back to the main motion as amended. Any further discussion on that? Seeing no raised hands, we will come to a vote, and I will assume unanimous consent unless I see a raised hand to object. Seeing no raised hands, the motion passes unanimously. Now, agenda item 10, Legistar 70781, approving a certified survey map. Commissioner Cantrell.
I will recommend that the Plan Commission forward the 2-lot certified survey map to the Common Council with a favorable recommendation.
Is there a second? Seconded by Commissioner Mendez. Did you wish to speak to your motion, Commissioner Cantrell? No. Okay. Tim Parks, you had something you wanted to?
Yeah, we just want to make sure that the condition for number 10 is consistent with the condition for number 9. So should we assume?
Yes.
Thank you very much for clarifying. We'll make sure that condition appears on both items. Thanks.
Okay. Thank you. Is there any discussion? Seeing no raised hands, we'll come to a vote, and I will assume unanimous consent unless I see a raised hand to object. Seeing no raised hands, the motion passes unanimously. Now moving on to agenda items 11, 12, 13, and 14. Agenda item 11, Legistar 70942, located at 3900 through 3920 Monona Drive and 109 Cottage Grove Road, 15th Alder District. Consideration of the demolition permit to demolish 4 commercial buildings. Agenda item 12, Legistar 71223, creating sections of the Madison General Ordinance to rezone property located at same address. 15th Alder District from NMX District to TSS District. Agenda item 13, Legistar 70943, located at 3900 through 3920 Monona Drive and 109 Cottage Grove Road, 15th Alder District, of a conditional use in the proposed traditional shopping street district to construct a mixed-use building with greater than 48 dwelling units. Consideration of a conditional use in the TSS district for vehicle access, sales, and service windows, and consideration of a conditional use in the TSS district for a building exceeding 3 stories and 40 feet to construct a 5-story mixed-use building with approximately 69 apartments and 6,500 square feet of commercial space with 2 vehicular access, sales, and service windows. Agenda item 14, Legistar 70957, approving a certified survey map of property owned by Krupp Grove family and 3900 Monona Drive LLC, located at the same address as above, 15th Alder District. And we will hear from Tim Parks.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Members of the Plan Commission, just briefly, items 11, 12, 13, and 14 are related to the redevelopment of 3 parcels at 3900 through 3920 Monona Drive and 109 Cottage Grove. Currently, there are 4 buildings on the 3 parcels. The applicant is seeking to demolish all of the existing buildings, all of which are 1-story buildings, rezone the site from NMX to TSS, and receive conditional use approvals to construct a 5-story mixed-use building with approximately 69 apartments, 6,500 square feet of commercial space. And of note, the 2 commercial suites will both be served, are proposed to be served by 2 vehicle access, sales, and service windows. And lastly, the applicant is seeking approval to combine the 3 existing parcels into 1 lot to serve the mixed-use development. The site is a 0.88 acre site that extends on the east side of Monona Drive from Cottage Grove Road to Davidson Street. The site is recommended for neighborhood mixed use in the comprehensive plan and up to a 5-story development per the Cottage Grove Road Activity Centers plan. Staff believes that the requests before the Plan Commission can meet the applicable standards. And like the Plan Commission just did a few moments ago with the project on Olin Avenue, staff will ask the Plan Commission to provide individual actions on the 4 questions before it. I'd be happy to answer any questions
Yes.
on the project following the public hearing. Thank you.
I will open the public hearing. We do have registrants. The first registrant is Kevin Burrow, University Avenue, Middleton, in support, wishing to speak, representing Kanothi Bruce Architects. Kevin, you have 3 minutes.
All right, good evening. Thank you very much. What we have before you tonight is, Tim just described, is redevelopment of the parcels as shown on the screen there, bordered by Cottage Grove Road, Monona Drive, and Davidson Street to the south. You go to the next slide, please. What we are proposing is a mixed-use building, total of 5 stories, with the entire first floor as commercial space and lobby access. We do have 2 vehicle sales and service windows. The users for this are UW Credit Union at the corner of Monona Drive and Cottage Grove Road, and the Java Cat coffee shop on the southern end, which is currently already on this property. Can you go to the next slide, please? We've got the proposed layouts here. We do have vehicular parking in the basement, a total of 77 parking stalls under the building, and then an additional 23 surface parking stalls is shown on the right-hand side, and then the red area represents the commercial space. One thing to note is how the circulation for this has been worked out through numerous discussions and specifically with meetings with traffic engineering to have both of these drive-through windows function effectively without causing any cross-traffic issues. Can you go to the next slides, please? The upper floors here are shown. We do have a community space located on the second floor, which has access to a larger outdoor gathering space. Then third and fourth floor is a continuation of the housing units, which is a mixture of studios, 1 and 2 bedrooms. Next slide, please. Here you've got the uppermost story, and the thing to note here is that we are stepping the building back on all sides exposed to streets with a building step back such that it will present itself as a 4-story building. And the strongest step back is occurring on the southern end, which is most adjacent to any residential properties. Can you go to the next slide, please? Here you can see some perspective views. This is a view looking down from Cottage Grove Road, where you can see vehicles exiting the sales and service window for the Utica Credit Union. But you can see how the upper stories are stepped back. If you go to the next slide, please. Here's the main corner view then of the intersection of Cottage Grove Road and Monona Drive. And you can see the Utica Credit Union predominantly displayed here. Next slide, please. Here's a further view looking then now down Monona Drive. Next slide, please. And here's a view where this end of the building is actually the Java Cat Coffee Shop with their drive-through located on the back side of the building. But here you can see the major step back on the 5th floor level. Next slide, please. Here's then a view looking back in. This is the access point then for the Java Cat Coffee. And then you can also see the ramp to the underground. One adjustment that was recently made is widening the buffer area between this parcel and the residential property to the west. We do now have that 6-foot buffer and a screen fence. If you go to the next slide, please. Here's a close-up view then of that screening that has been added. Next slide, please. Here's a view, a further view how we can enhance this with landscaping. And then the final slide, please. You can see the plaza area that's been created for all residents to have access to on that 2nd floor level. So they have some secure and safe outdoor gathering space above any vehicle areas.
Thank you, Kevin. That concludes your available time.
Thank you.
The next registrant is Tyler Krupp, Atwood Avenue, Madison, in support and wishing to speak. I assume that you're representing the developer. If you could clarify, Tyler, and you have 3 minutes.
Yes, I work with the developer. I think Kevin covered most of what I wanted to speak to. I'll just emphasize, I think the project was dramatically improved by early input from traffic, neighborhood, and especially Elder Grant Foster. I feel like the traffic flows on the site have really been improved, and we're grateful for their input. Make myself available to answer questions with Joe Krupp. Thank you.
Okay, very good. The next registrant is Joe Krupp, Woodland Trail, Middleton, in support, not wishing to speak, but available to answer questions. And that is it in terms of registrants. Are there questions of any of our registrants? Commissioner Cantrell.
I just have one question for Kevin. The site plan has on the side street access, an in-access, I think, to the underground parking. It has like a 2-way access to the parking under the building and the drive up, and then it has a 1-lane access point in, I'm assuming, to the underground parking. I just thought that was kind of a unusual arrangement, but can you just describe why it was designed that way?
Kevin, can we get Kevin up again, please? And unmuted?
Yes, thank you very much. Your point is...
oh, okay, it's an out, okay.
It's an out only. It was a unique solution they worked out with traffic so that should Java Cat be busy in the morning, residents can still exit the underground parking ramp and not have to try and cross traffic.
Okay. Okay, now I see what you were doing. Thanks, Kevin.
Yeah, we do have an exit only onto Monona Drive, which is another concession with traffic engineering as well, to really circulate those receiving coffee to head further north into the city then.
Okay. So any individual that wanted to come from that Davison Street to the underground parking, they could come in that way, but they would just have to turn right and go under. Okay.
Correct.
Okay. Thanks so much.
Alder Heck.
Thank you. I have a question for Kevin also, kind of in the same vein. I noticed the bicycle parking area in the underground part, or on the first level, I guess. I'm curious as to how cyclists will enter and exit. Will they be taking that same ramp as the cars?
They do have that option of taking the ramp down to access that, or if they were to bring their building in or their bike in through the lobby, they could take the elevator down as well.
Okay, and it looked to me when I looked at that the other day that it was the bicycle stalls were kind of in the middle of that area, and the elevator was at another end and the ramp was at another, so they're kind of, it's a little bit awkward for cyclists, I think. Well, I guess it's close to the ramp. Okay, it's not super close to the elevator. All right, that answers my question. Thank you.
Sure, thank you.
Any other questions of our registrants? Seeing no raised hands, I'll close the public hearing. Questions of staff? Seeing no raised hands, I'm looking for a motion. Commissioner Cantrell.
I will move that the Plan Commission find that the standards for the demolition permit are met and approve the demolition.
Is there a second? Seconded by Commissioner Fernandez. Did you wish to speak to your motion?
No.
Okay. Any comments, discussion? Seeing none, we will come to a vote, and I will assume unanimous consent unless I see a raised hand to object. Seeing no raised hands, the motion passes unanimously. And now I'm looking for a motion on the rezoning. Commissioner Cantrell.
I'll recommend that the Plan.
Yep, you're right.
That the Plan Commission forward the zoning map amendment, rezoning 3900 to 3920 Nona Drive and 109 Cottage Grove Road from NMX to TSS to the Common Council with a favorable recommendation.
Is there a second? Seconded by Commissioner Fernandez. Did you wish to speak to your motion, Commissioner? No. Any comments, discussion? Then we will come to a vote, and I will assume unanimous consent unless I see a raised hand to object. Seeing no raised hands, the motion passes unanimously. And next, we will be considering the conditional uses. Commissioner Cantrell.
I'll recommend that the Plan Commission find that the standards for conditional uses are met to approve the construction of a 5-story mixed-use building with approximately 69 apartments and 6,500 square feet of commercial space and 2 vehicular access sales and service windows for approval.
Is there a second? Seconded by Commissioner Fernandez. Did you wish to speak to your motion, Commissioner Cantrell?
Yes, I'll speak to this one. I think this is a very good development for this site. I think that incorporating 2 drive-up windows or facilities in one building, I think is they've done a really good job. And I think kudos to city staff in working with them and working out the traffic issues in order to do that. I was on the commission when we reviewed another project along Cottage Grove Road, and that was controversial because it took out a lot of retail space at the time. So that's one of the reasons why I think that project did not come through. But this project actually removes some buildings, which I think is appropriate in this case. And again, I think it meets all the standards that we have, and it's a very attractive project for this major corridor.
Thank you, Commissioner. Any other comments, discussion? Seeing none, we'll come to a vote, and I will assume unanimous consent unless I see a raised hand to object. Seeing no raised hands, motion passes unanimously. And then last is approving the certified survey map, agenda item 14. Commissioner Cantrell.
And I'll recommend that the Plan Commission forward the certified survey map, which combines 3900 to 3920 Monona Drive and 109 Cottage Grove Road into one lot with the Common Council with the favorable recommendation.
Is there a second? Seconded by Commissioner Fernandez. Did you wish to speak to your motion, Commissioner Cantrell? No.
No, thank you.
Anyone have any comments? Discussion? Seeing none, we will come to a vote, and I will assume unanimous consent unless I see a raised hand to object. Seeing no raised hands, the motion passes unanimously. Next will be, is there any business by members? Seeing none, secretary's report. Kevin.
Thanks, Chair. Just to note, the recent council actions are noted on the agenda, and this includes an amendment to the TRU2 district to correct an issue with the TRU2 district to reflect a change that was made on the floor. It was unanimously, I believe, recommended by the Plan Commission and approved by the council, along with the repeal of the protest petition was at the Common Council on their June 7th meeting. As far as the upcoming matters, just to highlight a couple of those items. Coming up on June 27th, I will note that there is an item listed on there for 802 through 826 Regent Street, based on some recent correspondence. I believe that one will be pushed back to a later date, and that's as of earlier today. But also before the commission scheduled is the demolition permit at 131 West Wilson Street, residential building complex at 2101 through 2115 East Springs Drive. What we'll have among the items on June 27th, and then scrolling ahead to July 11th, note that there is 3401 East Washington. This is the Bimbo Bakery site, and it's a series of approvals to do a residential building complex on that site. And I believe at this point, there's also the 400 block of State Street next to Lisa Lake Peace Park. There's currently a development that's scheduled to be before you on July 11th. But please take a look at both of the list for upcoming matters for further information. At this point, that's all I have for the Secretary's report.
Okay, great. Thank you. Any other announcements? Seeing none, we would be looking for a motion to adjourn. Moved by Commissioner Cantrell, seconded by Commissioner Solheim. And I will assume unanimous consent unless I see a raised hand to object. Seeing no raised hands, we are adjourned, and I will see you all on June 23rd at 5 o'clock for our special TOD meeting. Thank you all. Bye.